First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from January 9th and January 19th.
Move for approval.
Second. Approved, moved and seconded. Any comments, corrections, additions? Seeing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Council representative report.
That's you.
Michael.
I don't know it. I don't have it, so.
Always approved.
Realistically.
Yeah, well, the principal item that was on the agenda in January was the CSM related to the Williams Drive split of property for the NAFA project, and that was approved at the council on the council in January. That's all.
Sounds good. Any other questions or comments? My comments? Seeing none. Next item then is status of developments. You can find it within the packet. Do you have any comments?
Certainly nothing specific to report. The packet contains some summaries of where recent or more recent projects that have been through the Planning Commission, what the status of those is at this point. An inquiry from someone in a previous meeting was questioning when the Walmart Supercenter was scheduled to open. We understand the middle of March is when that facility is planned to open for business.
Okay. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 5, which is from Ed Heckman, Heckman Enterprises, LLC, requesting preliminary and final condominium plat approval for property located at 160-170 Business Park Circle. I think what we'll do is we'll have Rodney give us a quick overview. We do have a public hearing on this, so after a quick overview, we'll come back to comments.
On the screen is a site that contains the facilities that we're talking about. The perimeter of this parcel will remain as one larger lot. Their desire is to create a condominium plat that would create some common areas, parking and others, and some areas designated for the 2 existing buildings that are on the site now. The front building was the original building. A separate building was constructed later in the rear portion of this facility. We understand that the business entities have separated into separate organizations, and the desire to create separate ownership is the reason for this. Subsequent to this, you'll see on a future agenda item, they have a desire to put an addition onto the rear facility in this area as well, and we'll talk about that at the next item. The reason for a condominium plat: this lot could not be split in a traditional fashion to create 2 separate parcels with the ability to still meet setbacks, as well as the parking splitting of that. The minimum frontage area along Business Park Circle could not be maintained. So the creation of a condominium plat recognizes the outer perimeter as one sole larger parcel with the individual areas identified within the condominium plat. So with that background, certainly there can be further discussion and questions answered after the public hearing.
Sounds good. With that background, I would declare the public hearing open. Are there any speakers?
No, just to register and support.
We have one registrant, Jay Blackburn, 2078 Barber Drive, in support, and just wishing to register only, not to speak. Are there any other guests this evening wishing to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And want to have the applicant.
Is there any additional information that I didn't provide in the overview that the representatives would like to add?
Ron Kloss with D'Onofrio Kotke. We are here representing the owners and prepared the condo plat as well as a preliminary plat to go with it. And Rodney, I thought, summed it up well, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Alderman Jensen, do you have a question?
Not a question. I just wanted to relay that this was reviewed by the Business Park North prior to this meeting, and it was approved by that committee.
Thank you. Michael, Alderman Engelberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question with regard to the site plan and I guess my question is, the building is a little cocked out in front. Is that the one that's future building, or what is that?
Unit 160 is an existing facility,
Okay.
and this is an existing building as well on the site already.
So the addition is just the back part?
Just to building 170.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an addition onto
I
the,
was going to say, why don't we just turn that a little bit, but I guess if it's already there, I guess we can't do that.
tough to do at this point.
We could do it, but it would cost a lot of money, I would
Yeah.
bet. We could. It's just a little odd to me that it was cocked like that.
Other questions, comments? Mr. Hanna?
Move for approval.
Motion to approve, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Jensen.
That was for the resolution that was contained in the packet.
Right, I was going to say, yeah, that's for the.
Just for the condominium plat.
Right, correct. And that's the resolution that was contained in the packet? Yep. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Motion passes. Next item on our agenda is item 6. John Bieno from TJK Design Build requesting site plan approval for the building addition at 170 Business Park Circle. Rodney, can you give us an overview?
John's in the building and able to take over if I don't handle this properly, but he's not feeling as well as he should. So I'm just going to give a quick summary of the project addition. The project is actually an addition as initially described on the rear onto the building found in the rear portion of the parcel. This represents the addition, approximately 5,000 square foot addition. There's a patio area that's proposed on this site as well as increased landscaping and parking areas. You'll note the parking areas are being expanded to accommodate the number of occupants as required by the code. And the staff review letter is contained in your packet for this site plan review as well. We can certainly go into greater detail, and the designers are here to answer questions related to the greater detail. I should just highlight there was a question during the Business Park North review about stormwater management. Stormwater management is required and is shown in concept on the plan as to how they plan to handle that additional stormwater demand. And that will be reviewed as part of our Dane County review process. It's outlined in the staff review letter, of which it's recommended action be taken conditioned upon the staff review letter.
Questions of the commission? Alderman Engelberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question for Rodney. Everything in order as far as, I didn't see any exceptions here?
No, not exceptions. I think we're just recommending that our staff review letter be one of the conditions of the approval, and that's contained in the resolution.
So moved.
Moved by Engelberger, the resolution. Is there a second? Seconded by Jensen. Further questions, comments? Mr. Hanna?
Sorry, there's a contingency on that, staff?
Yeah.
Yeah, staff review letter.
Yeah, in the resolution, just for this and future ones, the bottom item on the resolution under the be it resolved, we list that as one of the conditions.
Great.
Rodney got tired of us missing that when we were making our motion, so got it kind of cleared up there.
Cool.
Any other comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you. Next item on our agenda then is item number 7, Casey's Marketing Company requesting a rezone of the property at 1640 East Main Street from RH Rural Holding to PB Planned Business. And again, we'll have a public hearing on this, and Rodney, if you could provide an overview.
Yeah, there's representatives from the team here that'll probably speak in much more detail on this one, but suffice it to start the discussion by identifying where this project is for the people at home. Main Street or Highway 51 runs along the bottom of the screen here. County Trunk Highway N runs north-south at this point. The vacant site on the northwest corner of that intersection is where it's proposed to construct a Casey's General Store. The applicant is currently working with the DOT for access onto Highway 51, as shown here. Likewise, they're working with the county for access on County Trunk Highway N. I think it's noteworthy to point out that the points of access that they're proposing are as far as they can be from the intersection in both locations. The facility does include the sidewalk extension along, or at least in concept, the sidewalk extension along Highway N. Any work in the county right-of-way, this portion of County N, will have to be approved by Dane County. But at this point, it does include the sidewalk extension here. So the building is recessed from the front of the site with the canopy for the pump stations nearing the front part of the property. Can certainly go through more detail as the commission desires or the public requests as part of the public hearing.
Sounds good. Thank you. With that, I'll declare the public hearing open. And we have one registrant, Dave Natter, trustee for the Natter Property Trust, wishing to speak. Mr. Natter?
Good evening. My name is Dave Natter. I am the trustee for the Natter Marital Property Trust. We've owned this piece of property for decades, and one of the reasons that we wanted to be annexed into the city of Stoughton and requested that was for future business purposes and so on. So Casey's is a great company to work with. It's certainly going to be a project that's going to help the east side create jobs, and we'd like to see it, the rezone happen. We'd like to see the project happen, and just if there's any questions, you know, you can either ask me or anybody else there. Thank you.
Just to clarify for the team here, I tried to give you a little bit overview. The first item on your agenda is really about the rezoning request. I gave you a site plan summary as well. The request initially, and your first item on the agenda for this, is to consider rezoning to planned business. It's currently in a rural holding zoning pattern, and the comprehensive plan anticipates this for a planned business. So a change to a planned business would be consistent with a comprehensive plan.
Sounds good. Are there any other? Sir? Please state your name and.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Ryan Swanson. I'm with ARC Design Resources. We're here on behalf of Casey's, and I'm just happy to answer any questions. I can either do it on item 7 or 8, however you decide, but
Probably more appropriate on 8.
no problem.
Okay. Unless there are any questions right now on the rezoning? Yes.
I just have a question regarding the ownership. Is that, the ownership going to be, Casey's going to take over ownership of the property after the?
Yes, sir. Currently, they have it under contract with the seller, and they will be purchasing it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other speakers on this item, on the rezoning? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And we'll move on to discussion. Rodney, I don't know if.
I don't have anything
Yeah,
more to add related to the zoning.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the rezoning. Alderman Engler?
Just on the question, everything's in order, Rodney, regarding zoning for this particular?
Yeah, we believe the rezoning is appropriate, change of zoning to the planned business. Again, it's consistent with what the comprehensive plan envisions for this parcel. The merits of the site would be discussed on item 8.
Thank you.
And the full, I assume, again, the full ordinance is in our packet again, so that's, I'm assuming we're moving. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item 8, Casey's Marketing Company requesting a conditional use permit for in-vehicle sales and service use, including outdoor display incidental to indoor sales and services, to accommodate Casey's General Store at 1640 East Main Street.
So, assuming that the rezoning is put into effect by council action, they're pursuing the conditional use, of which the indoor vehicle sales and service use is a conditional use in the planned business district. So that's why it's before you in the form of a conditional use application. you actually have two items kind of to consider under this agenda item. One is the conditional use for the indoor or in-vehicle sales and service and the outdoor display incidental to the indoor sales. And then subsequent to that, we'd be looking for action specific to the site plan. So I think we can discuss them both in concert, but ultimately there's two separate actions necessary for this. Is there any questions specific to the use or conditional use discussion? Again, if you think that there's things that merit discussion as part of the conditional use conditions that you would apply onto them that are outside of your site plan authority, certainly you could consider that, but none come to mind at this point.
With that in mind, at this time, I would declare the public hearing open. And again, we have Mr. Natter had registered, and the gentleman from ARC had also. I don't know if either one of you would like to add anything at this time?
No, I put forward my advice.
I wouldn't necessarily need to add anything unless there are certain questions, and I can give you an overview of the site layout if you'd like as well, at the commissioner's choice.
Sure.
Pleasure. Let's do it as
Yeah,
part
let's
of
see.
the public hearing.
Okay.
Please.
Okay, thank you. The existing site is obviously currently undeveloped. It's about 1.4 acres, excluding the rights-of-way of N and Main Street. The site's fairly flat with about 2 feet of relief, 2 to 3 feet from corner to corner. Proposed, you've got about a 4,300 square foot convenience store element here, 6 dispensers under canopy at this location, 15 parking stalls for customers. We've got a few stalls back here for employees in front of the trash enclosure there, which is pretty well hidden from motorists, especially on Main Street. As Roddy mentioned, we are working with the county and the state on our access points. During our initial staff meeting, they gave us some good feedback on this location, and we did push it as far back as we could. As also mentioned, we're proposing sidewalk, as you can see here, as well as the curb and gutter. So that cross-section will be a full urban section at that point, which I think will really kind of complete that corner. Underground tanks are located on this side. And essentially the placement of all these items provides for effective circulation, obviously for customers, but also for delivery trucks, which can enter either driveway and maneuver around the canopy, which is high enough to let them do that. But this area specific here is for grocery delivery only, and then the tankers would be here. So the trucks can circulate. Some of the amenities on the site, really your codes really require or provide for a good amount of setback from the surrounding properties and rights of way. So we've got at least 10 feet along the front, which gives a good, good green space buffer. And then on the west side and north side, we've got 20 feet or more. This site also contains a 6-foot fence. So between the landscaping, the setback, it provides a good green buffer to the west, and then also some landscaping along the north side there. Lighting that Casey's uses is all full cutoff LED lighting fixtures. Even the lighting under the canopy these days is much more subdued than lights of the past. So they really advanced, not just Casey's, but any fuel vendor really is improved vastly on that issue. 2 monument signs are proposed, one at this corner at the northeast and one at the southwest. We are proposing monument signs, which would have a brick base to match the store materials with some foundation plantings around that. One thing we've also done is added some foundation plantings along the front of the store, which is probably atypical for most. Mostly you have the sidewalk, but we have added some foundation plantings. Okay, go to the next slide, the building slide right here. Thank you. This is the proposed building. Primarily it's a brick material on the front and the 2 sides, siding material in the rear. It's a ephes material that complements the brick color. It's kind of a beige color. Windows are on the front facade, as you can see. These are real windows. piers with cornice treatment. Really allows for some articulation for the building itself. Raised parapet, as well as screening for rooftop units, and this shows up on here. And thank you, these are each side, so this will be the west and east elevations that matches the front facade. Here you can see the lighting, which is used for security. These are, I think, 10 feet in height, much lower than the lights in the parking lot. The one thing I forgot to mention too, the brick trash enclosure is also going to be a brick material that was located here. Will match, it'll be a brick surround, which will match the store materials with a gate, wood gate in the front. We are working on engineering at this point. Utilities will come off of N. Utilities are on the other side of N, water and sewer. Stormwater detention is envisioned in this green space area back here. The site will be curb and gutter everywhere, inlets, storm sewer. So most of that will be unseen until you get to the corner back here where it'll be, detention will be provided and meet your codes. With that, I really don't have anything else. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Matt?
Yeah, thanks for the review, the thorough review. I guess two questions I had would be the stormwater area, is that just going to be turf? So like a 4-foot depression shown on there?
It will more than likely be a wet feature to meet the code, the DNR codes for a facility for water quality. We've just done this down in Beloit a couple years ago. And usually to meet the codes with this small of a site, it's easier to do a wet basin feature. So it wouldn't be very deep, but it would likely be a wet surface.
Just turf plants?
Yes, correct.
And then, excuse me, in the packet, there is a mention on the sidewalk along Main Street. There being existing sidewalk at 4 feet. Would that be adjusted to the 5-foot width, or that new sidewalk that you're proposing?
Back down through here.
Yeah.
Right now, as proposed, we're basically fixing it through the driveway. We'd be willing to work with staff. I mean, it needs to probably be mowed and then cleaned up, edged, if you will. We'd be willing to work with staff, and if there's pieces that should be replaced or upgraded, we can consider that, certainly.
Alderman Engelberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple questions regarding the dumpster enclosure. That is enclosed?
I'm sorry, the
dumpster is
Yes, sir.
enclosed, the dumpster area?
Yes, sir. This one right here, yep. It's fully enclosed, so you'd have basically the brick on 3 sides, and the gates in the front would be
Okay.
wooden.
And then as far as tanker semis, they're going to be able to get in there? It looks
Yes.
a little tight to me.
It is, and we've provided some turning movements to staff. But yeah, the tanker actually is easier of the 2 trucks. The tanker's a little bit shorter than the grocery truck they use, which is a full-size tractor trailer. They can both maneuver. Again, the canopy is high enough to where they can maneuver basically around that.
Okay.
So that's how they would work.
Just looks a little tight in there for me.
Staff had the same question, and we were basically provided some details for that.
Just to note that any action that we take will ultimately be conditioned upon both the county and state review, because we've got both state highway and county highway N. So they'll have an opportunity to take a look at it as well.
This kind of the spaghetti-looking drawing depicts the maneuvering around, and you can see even though there's a little bit of clipping here, but again, they can make that because they can go under the canopy.
Okay. Any other questions of the speaker? Mr. Mahoney?
What's the hours of operation?
Typically, unless they're prohibited by code, often they're 24 hours. I'm not guaranteeing that here at this location. They kind of make tweaks, but usually unless it's required by code, they would request a 24-hour store.
Other questions of the speaker? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other guests wishing to speak on this in public hearing? Mr. Mattson?
My name is Tom Madsen. I reside at 2321 Tower Drive in Stoughton. I own a building across the street to the south of the site. I certainly support the development on the east side, and happy to see that. My only concern is kind of looking at the east elevation of the building as depicted. that I'm wondering if it's something, a little bit more to provide some type of ornamental fenestration on this building could be done, as this is kind of the gateway into the city. Whether they might include some faux windows with, some type of treatment on the side of the building, I guess what I see. Just keeping in mind that this is kind of everybody's first entry into the city.
So east elevation would be the lower and the right elevation?
Correct. Yep.
So other than that, I'm certainly in support of the project.
Any questions of Mr. Mattson? Seeing none, thanks, Tom. Any other speakers on this item? Please come on up, state your name.
Jerry Johnson, 1621 East Main. We're across the street next to Tom. 2 questions about the traffic. We have real problems getting out at 7 o'clock in the morning now, out of our driveway if you look to the south. And I'm wondering, well, I'm not wondering, I know it's going to be worse than it is now, and it's bad now. So I don't know how that's going to be planned to work out. My second question is, when we built in '94, we had to put up a berm and a lot of green space, which is fine, I'm all for it. And I don't see a berm or a lot of green space with a little strip next to the sidewalk. What I would do is move that back and bring some of that grass and stuff around the front so it looks a little presentable when you come into Stoughton. You see some trees and bushes instead of a gas station and a car repair place that has no berm, has no green space, which is right on the corner. That's what I'm referring to. So the traffic and, yeah, go ahead.
Alderman Engelberg.
Yeah, just 2 things. Rodney, can you point to the driveway he's talking about? Is it the one right across the street?
His driveway? Right here.
Yep.
So if you're coming out of our driveway trying to turn left and go downtown for something, good luck.
You're not on the corner, or are you?
No, the corner place is the car place.
Okay. One more question I had was, I mean, I have concerns on the sidewalk in that area also. I don't know if the current sidewalk that is there is really compliant with other developments that we have. As far as setbacks, I know when we've had plow issues in that area in the wintertime where the county comes through with a plow and basically covers the sidewalk with snow from the road. And I don't know if that sidewalk is closer than normal developments or not.
Certainly, this is DOT right-of-way in this area. As you can appreciate, the DOT has widened the roadway and caused the sidewalk to be positioned in relationship to the property line as it is in other locations, but there isn't much terrace there. I actually think the opportunity to have somebody on site here will allow a more concerted effort to maintain the sidewalk here. Now, I should also add, going to the points to the east, this is not in the city limits.
Right.
So this parcel is in the city and kind of the 3 sides around it. But on the west side of it, there's a few homes and some sidewalk that is not currently in the city
I
limits.
guess my point is, you're developing a site, why aren't we putting in a new sidewalk that basically complies with current developments, where it's set back a little bit farther, and it's, instead of going from 5-foot to 4-foot sidewalk, having a sidewalk that actually looks like a decent development there? That's my question.
I think what I heard the applicant indicate is their willingness to increase the width of the sidewalk where it doesn't comply with the width. Anything that they were planning to put along here is already proposed to be 5 foot in width. The area that would remain 4 foot and is a point of consideration might be this area along the front of the property.
Other questions of this speaker? Seeing none, thank you. Are there any other speakers wishing to address the commission this evening? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And we'll continue.
The resolution related to the conditional use permit is before you.
Right. Discussion, questions?
So, oh, go ahead.
Mr. Maloney?
Do we have site plan after that?
Yep.
Okay.
And again, all the resolutions are in your packet. first item.
If
then
there are
six.
specific things that you think you need to do to make the operation coherent in the neighborhood, that would be something you look at within the conditional use. If there's site-specific issues that you think are appropriate, that would be handled in the next agenda item. You mentioned hours.
Just as a clarification, though, too, Mr. Mattson's comment about perhaps suggesting changes in the exterior of the building, would that be conditional, under the conditional use side? Would you like to take it?
I think you could take it in a conditional use, but I think generally the conditional use is looking at the operation as opposed to the site itself.
So Rodney, you don't have any concerns over the conditional use portion of this?
I think this is a use that's consistent with what was envisioned for this area, a planned business use, as we've recommended already for the rezoning. I certainly understand the issues about traffic. The proximity to the traffic signal, I think, is somewhat of a benefit in that situation. Hopefully there will be some consideration of how the DOT's times the signal, if changes out here are warranted for that.
And I'm assuming that it's a convenience store, they're probably going to have liquor sales, and they know about the procedures to go through as far as obtaining licenses for that?
Yeah, we spoke to them, and I think they spoke to the city clerk about the process related to if they're desiring alcohol sales.
So I'd make a motion to approve the conditional use.
Let's move.
I'll second.
Seconded by Hannah.
With the conditions, if there are any.
And again, the resolution, I assume we're moving the resolution in our packet. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none on the conditional use permit, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Which then brings us to the site and building plans.
Maybe I could just lead off the discussion so I can itemize the items that we highlighted in the resolution in the be it resolved portion of the resolution. Certainly our staff review letter we would like to see included in that. The access drives, we've spoke to the fact that DOT and county have jurisdiction over those and they'd need to obtain that. Additional issue is the access drive width. Our ordinances allow for special consideration of the width. The width that would normally be understood as a 30-foot max here, I believe was it both of them, Ryan, or was it was both of them? Both of them are proposed to be a 35-foot wide width. Now again, DOT and the county will have an additional set of eyes on that. Maybe if you wanted to have the applicant speak to the rationale for that, but it certainly aids to the circulation issues that were talked about earlier. The two other conditions are confirmation of the rezoning by the council and confirmation of the conditional use application by the council as well.
In the staff review letter, that's item number 21 that addressed the drive width and the like.
Correct.
Sir, come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The rationale behind the wider drives, and this is based on experience, but basically it's just to allow for truck turning without tearing up curb, or more importantly, the turf behind the curb. That allows for a nice wide turning movement. We've had some situations where we've done some kind of paving or something behind the curb with a narrower drive, but it just doesn't look as attractive. It's just a clean driveway. So often 35 or 36 is usually what we do, or propose, I should say. But it's mostly to allow for adequate truck turning without tearing up turf and curb and gutter.
Alderman Engelberg.
Thank you, Your Honor. I mean, you're Mr. Chairman. You're not the mayor. Just on that, I guess on that point, with our other convenience store locations, are they 30-foot widths or 35-foot?
Well, I think most of them are wider than 35 in some cases. I won't use the oddball, but I think...
accommodate the truck traffic and those types of things?
Yeah, it's not unusual to have that request for this type of site. We've also made exceptions as part of industrial sites.
Thanks, Mr. Troll. Ryan?
Yes.
While you're up here, I think Mr. Madsen's comments on the east side facade brings up a good point, as this is it's a gateway intersection. Considering those comments, do you have any thoughts on what you might be able to do with that facade to enhance the visual as people heading west into town? That is kind of the first thing that they see on that corner.
I think, frankly, I think the brick and the amount of brick they use is an attractive product, but frankly, his idea of possibly a faux window, maybe some kind of treatment, would be a good idea. That door, unfortunately or not, that door is required as part of their layout. However, what comes to mind immediately is, like I said, a faux window that we could add to that side to help kind of bring it up a little bit. I think we could consider that.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. That'd be a nice addition.
Okay.
Alderman Jensen?
Yeah, in the same vein, I was wondering, on the top of the building right there, that's your air conditioning heating unit?
Rooftop screening?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes,
Is
screening,
there-
rooftop
Is
screening.
there a way to mask that? I think that's something else that would deter from the attractiveness of the building.
I could look, basically the intent is, what's behind here is rooftop units, so what that's attempting to do is provide rooftop screening for the units. I can see if we can possibly adjust this parapet height. They probably want to just be symmetric on both sides, but we can probably raise that a little bit, but you'd still, at this elevation view, you'd probably still want the screening on the top of the roof.
Well, something like fencing or something that is just masking.
Yeah, it's like a screening material, but from the ground level, you'd see obviously less of that versus the parapet on the side as well. So this view obviously shows that pretty pronounced. However, from ground level, you wouldn't see it as bad as this kind of shows it. But I can investigate. I'm not sure what we can do on the sides, but I can investigate that and see if we can, along with, say, a faux window on this side, see if we can look at the parapet heights on both sides.
Please,
Pardon?
please.
Yes. Okay.
Other questions? Mr. Maloney?
On the sidewalk, I know this is a little tricky site, Rodney, but as far as having adequate land dedicated for adequate setback of the sidewalk from the street, is that something that the city can't just do?
Well, I certainly think you have the ability to have sidewalks
5 foot for sure.
put onto the private property or acquire right-of-way. However, there actually is, some terrace along the southern part here that's not easily seen here, but there is some. It certainly narrows on the existing area here, and they certainly are trying to accomplish some separation by installing a curb and gutter line here, so you'll have a grade separation as well for the sidewalk that they're proposing along this side. Maybe you can speak to us about, I think there's a pole line that affects the orientation of this physical position. Ryan, is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Here, I can't recall if it can be moved closer to the property line or closer to the, slide it to the west slightly more or not. Can you?
I think currently, the line is pretty close to the right-of-way on that east side, so I don't think it can be moved practically and gain much. I will say that the existing walk along Main Street is basically 1 foot into the right-of-way, which is fairly standard, fairly typical for sidewalk placement. So, it is, I would say at this point, where DOT had set it or established it as far north as practical at this point without pushing into our site. And then, as Rodney mentioned, the sidewalk over here we pushed as far as we can with the curb to enhance that as well. Again, we can look at this kind of this region in here to widen that. Obviously, we would hold as close to the right-of-way as we could, the line, to set back from the road as much as possible.
Alderman Engelberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the sidewalk thing again, I mean, I'm looking at the map on basically Google, or Access Dane. And, you know, all you gotta do is look across the street, across N. And I mean, you're showing a green space between the road and the sidewalk, and it's totally different here. I just feel that sidewalk issue needs to be taken care of. So you got some green space between the road and the sidewalk, like any normal development does, such as across the street that's already there, even though it's not developed yet. I'm looking at this sidewalk, it's not even parallel with Highway 51, with Main Street.
Correct.
It shows it that way on your plan. I mean,
It's parallel to the right-of-way.
I mean, we're doing a whole brand-new development here on this spot, on this plot. Why aren't we doing it right? You know, I realize there's some town areas in between to the west, and, you know, who knows, at some point that may be city. But when you go down 3 or 4 houses, and you pick up where the sidewalk is again, that's how it should be. That's how it's supposed to be. I just feel it needs to be changed at this point, rather than just butchering it up because there's a piece of sidewalk sitting there already. So I have a concern with that.
I think I should just highlight that the placement of the sidewalk as it is currently, I think was in relationship, I think this taper was created when they created the dedicated turn lane. So I think when the DOT did some realignment here, the sidewalk runs continuous and parallel to the property line. I think this taper, as you can see from this point, probably was in some respects caused when they created this turn lane.
So, and that's another reason that I would move the sidewalk back where it should be.
Okay. Is the request to acquire additional property or dedicate additional property for that, or I'm trying to, because right now they're utilizing the right-of-way to accommodate that public sidewalk. I don't know what, I'm just trying to get some direction.
Right-of-way or easement?
Yeah.
I guess I'm not sure why you would need to get new right-of-way. I mean, I just feel it should be moved back, and your green space should be between the road and the sidewalk, not between the sidewalk and the rest of the lot.
Other thoughts? I mean, as Chair, I guess I would speak also, I'd like to at least see the 5-foot sidewalk. You know, I think we needed to reconstruct that along that way to make it make sense. As Alderman Engelberger had pointed out, obviously the property next door is outside the city at this time, but I guess I would like to make sure that that's continuous along there. Other questions or other issues?
Sure. Thanks, Alderperson Truill. So the current terrace measurement right there where you have your arrow, that dimension line. Ryan, do you know approximately what that is right there?
About 5 feet. It's about as wide as the proposed walk, I'd say.
Ideally, I think I'd like to see that carried out consistent. At least the 5 foot to I guess parallel the new turn lane. As I think, you know, this is subject to kind of the old orientation before the road was adjusted. This wasn't touched, but to have that consistent width to be parallel with your parking, you know, I think that just gives some more continuity through there. And then the new proposed sidewalk up at the intersection where it is right on top of the curb and gutter. Now, I see there's a few symbols there for utilities. Is that telephone poles or transformers, or that's the limitation there?
Yeah, one thing is you've got a curb ramp here for the crossing.
Right.
So basically you've got a signal, a post here, a pole, pedestals, so all these are utilities that we're trying to actually snake through, but with the ramp here, it lends itself to following this around to at least get through the mass of utilities there.
Sure. And then as you head north, what do you have as far as a terrace width on that north side? I see that it tapers again.
This here that tapers, yeah, that's probably about 4 to 5 feet at the south end down here, sorry, and then tapers up. Here we've got, about 7 or 8 feet, again, with the overhead utility line to contend with, the poles through there. So we probably could shift this a little bit towards, get it to the pole as close as we can, and then get a little more distance out there
Right.
To the new curb.
Is there a way to create that 90-degree jog a little bit farther south to widen out that green space a little bit so that it doesn't get less than 5 feet based on pole location, things like that?
We can adjust, I guess this goes really to the Main Street side too. We can adjust this, but obviously it's subject to the county and state review.
Right.
And Casey's would have to grant an easement. Without granting right-of-way, they'd have to grant an easement. So if the parties can come to an agreement on the language of that, we can probably slide them both in to some degree.
Yeah.
The other problem on Main Street, there's, I think, a telephone pedestal down there too. So what we'd probably do is just right here. That just gets very costly to move those. So what we may be able to do is just shift it up. If the city was okay with it, maybe work with DOT and shift it up, which may address everybody's concerns. Perhaps, getting more than 5 feet out here and just hugging our curb line closer via an easement.
Sure. Yeah, I would say ideally 5 feet would be a minimum, and I'd be more in favor of 5 or more. Just being that just a heavy trafficked intersection, I think it'd be a little bit more pleasant for pedestrian experience, and just traffic-wise too, having people right next to the curb.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
otherwise-
So, like I said, subject to staff review, if we can slide that up and avoid, the sidewalk it's new regardless, and if we're adding this, stretch through here, that is what it is. But like I said, if we can come to terms with the agencies on an easement agreement, my thought is to slide it up and try to avoid, trying to avoid the utility relocations just because those get very costly.
Right.
So, but I think based on cursory review, I think we can probably accomplish that.
Other questions of the speaker?
If that occurs, can you speak to the landscaping that was planned in that,
Those trees.
whatever was planned in this area, and how that would be modified?
Fortunately, this area was open due to the sight triangle through the intersection. We did have some boulevard trees here and here. We'd have to look at those and see if we couldn't, if we have enough room on the remaining green strip on this side, that would be sufficient, or perhaps swap them to the boulevard side, or the street side, I should say. If the state was okay with that, we could just move them out.
Commissioner Hanna?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think you'd have enough room to still have the trees between the walk and the parking lot. My suggestion would be to eliminate the grass and turn it into, say, just one consistent bed, just for maintenance purposes, depending on that width. But I think you'd have plenty of width. I mean, you go look down on Main Street and trees are planted in basically a concrete I mean, there's a sea of concrete around it. I mean, it's really only a 3-foot square, so they'd be fine. I'd have a concern with maybe the birch and some urban tolerance issues with that, species-wise, but I could see that the landscape would still be feasible. I don't think to avoid that telephone pole, you're not having a tree, in line with that telephone pole anyway, so where you'd have that jog, I think you'd be able to avoid it and shift some things around.
Alderman Engelberger, did you
Yeah,
have a question?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just looking at this whole thing, I appreciate that their interest, or agreeable to at least maybe moving the sidewalk out so we got the 5 feet. It looks to me like there's almost at least 20 to 25 feet throughout that whole L-shaped corner, all the way from, from driveway to driveway, basically. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of room there. And I guess one other option I'll just throw out there just for discussion would be a multi-use path as opposed to a sidewalk in that area. We've got the park not too far north of there on N. I don't know how, I know our Parks Commission or Parks Committee has been looking at and recommending a whole new plan for bike routes and that kind of thing. Just throw it out there for discussion in that area.
I mean, at the end of the day, it sounds like one, you have the space, but two, you're trying to avoid having to make costly utility relocations.
Correct.
So I think from our standpoint, what I'm hearing for sure is, again, the desire to have that terrace, again, to have new sidewalk, have it meet our current standards and the like. And so, I don't know, are there other questions regarding that or suggestions?
If I could add, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Please.
To your point, by avoiding utilities, I think we'll end up with probably quite a bit more than just the 5 feet. Because I want to avoid the pedestals and things like that. We'll probably end up shifting it on the other side of the right-of-way, frankly. So I think you end up with, more than 5 for sure.
It'll actually make it safer, and I think people feel comfortable being that much further off of that busy corner as well. So, other questions? Mr. Hanna?
Question on, maybe for you, Rodney, on wording this, making this motion. If we were to approve it, it sounds like there's a lot of different moving parts here that would need to be adjusted.
3 items I have so far. Sorry, Mr.
Yeah,
Hanna.
go ahead.
Again, the applicant has indicated a willingness to add a faux window on the east side. We're talking about at least a 5-foot sidewalk with at least a 5-foot terrace.
Yep.
And then there was the discussion about increasing the height of the parapet to reduce the visibility of the roof screen. Are there other conditions or other issues that folks feel?
I'd see none besides those 3.
Mr. Maloney?
On the landscaping plan, it looks like there is an attempt to screen to the adjacent parcel to the west.
Defense.
Going by the property, I couldn't tell the current use now, but it looks like a residential property.
It's residential property. It's a residential property.
Yeah. And so they'd meet the capacity to do residential with what they're showing.
They do, with a 6-foot-high fence and the distance and the amount of landscaping
20-foot
points along
setback
there.
too.
Yeah, I guess the question would be, do we want to see this back again with adjustments, or do we feel comfortable moving forward? Or Rodney, do you feel comfortable moving forward as a staff to look at this?
Well, I think you're headed down the right path, enumerating any of the conditions so that you act on them and you fully understand what you're anticipating to be the outcome. That's what I would recommend,
Okay.
just enumerating
Sure.
additional conditions.
Then on that, I think the only condition that was brought up from you, Mr. Jensen, would be the parapet. Is there any specifics that you would want to add into that condition, or?
I think just to make sure that it's noted that it's being addressed either with fencing, some kind of screening.
Yeah, I think that's important. Again, the applicant had indicating willingness to look at that. I think he is right. Right now, from the standpoint of a view from the ground, that they aren't as pronounced. Having said that, the further up the parapet, the more it screens. And again, realizing that we're talking about people that are coming in from the west side of, anyone coming in, going west on Highway 51 will see this building for a while because of the setbacks on the property to the east. So it is a good suggestion. You're willing to investigate. I don't know, is it do we want any kind of condition, or is it try your best, or what are you looking for
With regard to what?
with regard to the parapet?
I'd
Can I
like to make that.
a comment?
Please.
Typically, just for, I guess, discussion purposes, they wouldn't go, usually it's a little bit lower than this. This is the front of the store.
Right.
Which obviously is about the same height. Typically, like to have it lower just to provide some balance. So it wouldn't be any higher than this, I guess, let me
Correct.
offer that. But, we can raise this and try to get as close to that as we can by still giving the balance of the architecture balance, to the store itself.
If we went to that midpoint,
That would be-
that's in
that
there,
would
the
be
kind of the
fine.
top of the
That would
top
be
of the brick? Okay. All right. Alderman England?
Just a question on that. So, I mean, Greg's point was he didn't like the screening, right?
Yeah,
So, but this isn't gonna cover up the screening, it's gonna cover up some of the screening.
Actually, I think you'd be surprised how much it actually does, but the screening, is that ordinance requiring the mechanical screening?
Yeah.
I don't think the ordinance requires it.
Right. But do we call out any particular material that's required?
You're still gonna see it, you're not gonna see it as much, and normally it's a metal
Yep.
type.
You see a little portion of it over across the top.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Stan?
I would make a motion for approval contingent upon Alderperson Jensen's comments on the parapet.
Parapet, we're looking for it to go to perhaps the top of the brick on the front of the building? That's that midpoint flashing that we have there?
So in here
Somewhere in that
someplace?
Mhm.
The screening would be on the west side of it, or east side, right?
I would assume you do the parapet all on
Correct.
both sides.
I believe so, on both sides. It would look kind of weird from the front.
So that's the first condition is again parapet. Continue,
Yep.
Matt.
Aesthetic treatment to the east facade,
full
utilizing full window, or an awning or decorative awning or something like that over the door. So aesthetic enhancement to the east foundation.
I heard again the applicant indicating a willingness to do the full window. Are you looking for the full window and Good.
Would you be open to an awning, say, over that doorway to help disguise that a little bit, or?
Yes, typically they don't like awnings, however, I'm not sure how else to make that door prettier, to be honest with you. So we'll look at that, I think that's
one simple thing might also be
Acceptable.
just to paint it the same color
as the
opposed to
brick.
an accent?
Yeah.
Third, we had talked before was
Yep,
sidewalk.
and third is sidewalk, that terrace width be no less than 5 foot width from the curb,
Any additional conditions?
and a 5 foot width of walk. I don't know any other conditions. I would say it's also contingent upon the state or the state and the county, and then county stormwater
Right.
review,
Alderman Jensen, you have additional?
and then staff review.
Second, okay. So we have then is I've got a motion and a motion by Hannah, seconded by Jensen, for the resolution that was included in our packet with those additional conditions, dealing with the treatment of the east side of the building with full window, perhaps, again, a canopy, then looking at, again, the sidewalks as adjusted, and also the request for increase the height of the parapet. Any other conditions? And then obviously, again, like I said, state and county review.
Just, thank you. Just a question for Rodney. There aren't any other exceptions in the letter as far as,
No, the resolution highlighted the fact that the driveway widths, as we talked about.
We're okay with the
So
35-foot?
those are already enumerated in the resolution, and the 3 additional items that he just discussed are being added to the resolution for action.
okay, thank you.
Very good. All right, moved and seconded. Any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome to the neighborhood. Next item this evening is number 9, Mark Seidel of Pinnacle Engineering Group requests site plan amendment approval to construct a commercial building for Aldi's Food Market at 1399 US Highway 41. Run over.
Kevin can speak to this as well. Obviously, the commissioners have seen this before. The principal change to the site is related to the access along Haltz Road. For orientation purposes, Haltz Road is running along the north, or the top side of the page here. Jackson Street, as constructed, is running along the right-hand side of the page. Previously, they had indicated there would be no exit out of this onto the frontage road, Haltz Road. They indicated a need to have vehicular access out onto here. That's not intended for their truck exit. Their trucks would be utilizing the route, coming in that route and exiting out onto Jackson Street. But they need to have access out onto Haltz Road in order for them to accomplish their business model. Mr. Yeska, are you here to speak to any other item related to that site plan?
You're also adding sidewalk, is it not?
And the sidewalk, I'm sorry, thank you. The sidewalk that's been added along the Haltz Road side as well.
I think you got the wrong guy.
Oh, you're here for too many items. I'm sorry. Mark Seidel, sorry. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, I was getting really confused there.
You'll give whatever we want, right? On this
Right,
one.
Mark Seidel, Pinnacle Engineering Group. Again, just want to thank the commissioners for letting us come back before the commission. Ideally, we're looking, as Rodney said, we need passenger traffic to exit onto Holtz as well. Since our last meeting here at the commission, we have worked with staff to also add a sidewalk that was an issue before. And right now, we are working with Rodney to possibly get the DOT setback released, and then we would be able to put sidewalk in. That would also go on our site. So just a little update. And I also have Rob Merkel here with Aldi that will be able to answer any further questions with that.
Questions of the commission?
That's the only adjustment.
In addition to the sidewalks and the exiting onto Haltz.
And has the width changed, or it's just signage?
It's really just signage.
Yeah.
They were not going to allow discharge of traffic out that way.
Sure. I'd make a motion for approval. I think it's great to have the sidewalk included, and thanks for working through that.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Second. Moved by Hannah, seconded by Jensen for the resolution. Additional, Alderman Engelberg?
Just a question. Can you point out where the sidewalk is on that drawing there, Rodney? On Holtz? Maybe I'm missing something there.
On this drawing.
Slim.
It's actually, I'm sorry, it's slow on the
8 feet
screen.
off the curb, or the,
And then,
So it's in this general area.
and what about on the other, on Jackson?
Jackson Street, there's a shared use path.
That's the path right
That's
there?
already constructed.
What's that rectangular thing in the middle of the path? What is that?
Well, actually, that's not in the middle of the path. This is in the middle of the setback line.
Where is the path there?
So the path is out here in the right of way.
Okay, right there.
Yeah, so that runs along Jackson Street here.
Just looks like an
It's right
odd
here.
corner there. I mean, it's like a 90-degree. Isn't that usually rounded off there normally, or no?
Maybe in a perfect world, but you can see we're trying to fit this sidewalk in an area.
I mean, that's all new, right? That's not existing there, right?
This is new. Everything in Jackson Street is new.
Mm-hmm.
There's no curb and gutter. This is a rural section of Jackson.
Right.
We realize
Right.
we had this property.
Yeah.
But what's showing there is a new sidewalk then?
The new sidewalk is this section.
Okay.
Yep, come in here. That's correct.
That's the only change you're talking about here with this thing?
That and allowing vehicular traffic to come out onto Haltz Road in this manner. Cars, not trucks.
Okay. And doesn't need DOT approval, or does?
Does not.
Okay, so it's moved and seconded. Any other questions? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor, aye.
I,
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you. Brings us to item number 10. Kevin Yeska of JSD Professional Development requests site plan amendment approval for the True Hotel and Convention Center, 2500 Jackson Street.
You're up now, Mr. Yeska. He's outlined the proposed changes to the site and building, slight downsizing in the size of the convention center as well as in the hotel. Number of units or rooms has shrunk by 5. The capacity of the convention center is proposed to go down to 250. The site plan that's before you is reflective of that. The staff review letter, I think the one point that we need to highlight is on their site plan, they proposed to have a future addition of parking stalls in place here. Staff has interpreted this site to recognize this is 2 principal uses, the hotel use and the conference center. So they're not, we don't see them as being ancillary to one another. Therefore, the overall site, as we indicated in our staff review letter, would require at least 9 more stalls of this area to be constructed in order to meet the area shown as the conference center and the hotel. So with that, I think that's the biggest thing that the staff suggests is important to consider as to whether you confirm the fact that these are 2 separate principal uses and require the initial installation of those additional stalls to meet the parking requirement for that. Now, the literature that is contained in your packet certainly states their case as to why they see them as being more complementary in nature and maybe overlapping. So, you have that to consider as well.
Sure. Mr. Yeska or anyone from the group, would you like to add to the comments and bring us up to date? Again, within our packet, the hotel is apparently being reduced from 10,962 square feet to 10,948. Again, the number of rooms being reduced from 93 to 88. Conference center being reduced from 10,789 to 9,587 square feet, which then allows for the capacity to be reduced from 300 to 250. Sir.
Yep. To add to that too, just to go down that list quickly, it's a minor item. When we met in July, the trash enclosure was on the west side of our development. We've now flipped that over to the east side of the development. Made a little bit more sense in terms of maintenance staff and cleaning staffs coming out of the hotel and conference center. They're no longer having to walk through our showcase patio area. So we made that switch. Let's see, we've redesigned some stormwater areas. We've actually implemented a 3rd area down on the southwest corner, and that was due to, I guess, some updated soil boring information that we achieved from CGC and our infiltration rates changing that we weren't anticipating. We've also removed a light pole up on the north parking lot, and that has been, well, actually it hasn't been removed, it's just there for future installation. So on the north end of that 32 those 32 parking stalls, we will have a light pole if that were to go in. But to hit on Rodney's point there, working with S&L Hospitalities, who's going to be the operator, and then Forward Development Group as the owner, they're finding that a lot of people that are utilizing the hotel will also be, or utilizing the conference center will also be staying at the hotel, so you're going to see that overlap. So owners and operators really aren't concerned about those 9 stalls that were short here, and are confident or have a good understanding that we have room to develop in the future if needed. Our stormwater management plan has been designed to accommodate those additional 32 stalls, so all the ponds are sized correctly for that. So in the future, really what we're looking to do is pull an erosion control permit with the city and county to implement those additional 32 stalls. Architecturally, I do have Michael Moss here from ADCI to touch on any of the architectural changes if you'd like. And then we can also dive into the conference center patio space, which has tweaked aesthetically. It still has the same function and use, but really what S&L Hospitalities has told us is that they would like to have more gathering space as a patio directly out in front of the conference center, and then open up that lawn seating space to a lawn. Have more of that wedding ceremony feel. So we reduced the amount of concrete in our initial layout, and helped it accommodate the building a little bit more.
Quick question, sir. And that is, back to the parking, as you propose it right now, what would trigger that need for that extra space?
I guess if we did see that, the demand is a lot higher and maybe that overlap isn't there, we're confident that it is, but, if we're seeing that there is a shortage of parking, that's when we would immediately implement those additional 32 stalls.
Mr. Hanna?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Quick question for Rodney, maybe technically. If we approve the site plan to vacate those required 9 stalls, it kind of limits any sort of control that the city would have to, if there is a parking issue and you start seeing cars parking out on the road or which way, we wouldn't have any sort of jurisdiction to say, now you need to add them. Is that correct?
I don't see a mechanism to make that happen well. They may be well-intentioned to do that based on their perception of a need, but I don't know unless there's a financial mechanism to force that to happen that's implemented in some manner. One of the challenges that will be presented to this site is if there is overflow, the street doesn't offer parking. There's bike lanes that are on Jackson Street, so there won't be on-street bike or parking opportunities. Obviously, what we'd be concerned about is overfill into adjacent property owners that may or may not anticipate that type of overflow. 9 stalls doesn't sound like a whole lot, but I just raise that as a point of consideration and discussion.
On the screen again is some possible language. That's with regard to the parking spaces that Rodney and I talked about after the resolution went out to the packet. So, yeah. Mr. Moss, do you want to address us in terms of some of the architectural improvements? Changes?
And I guess just a note too on the parking that we're a little short there. What the zoning code would call for is that conference center is at 250, a 250 person occupants, and then also the hotel is completely full. So in the rarity that would happen, there's where the confidence with S&L, the confidence they have that is it going to happen, doubtful, would what we would have to say there. I'll let Michael touch on the architecture quick.
Good evening, everyone. As Kevin mentioned, my name is Mike Moss. I'm with ADCI in Lake Dalton, the project architect. I believe that Josh Johnson from our firm presented to you originally, and I've worked hand in hand with Josh through the implementation of the design. So basically, I'll run through touch on the different modifications to the project. Kevin just handed out our exterior facade board so you can actually see the finished materials along with the rendering images. For both the hotel and for the conference center. On the conference center, the pre-function space was lowered the roof line was lowered from 30 foot to 24 foot. Maybe if we could flip ahead, I think 2 images. One more. Yep. So the taller component in that image was previously at 30 foot. The pre-function space within the conference center is 16 foot wide. So when we started looking at our interior images, we kind of had a silo effect going on. It was just proportionately too tall for that space. So we brought that roof line down. Concurrently with that, that was item number 1 in the submittal information, but concurrently with that, the conference center, number 4, the overall width of the meeting room space was reduced 6 feet from 54 feet down to 48 feet. Again, to right size to that 250 target that we're trying to hit for quantity for a full-size reception. And part of the discussion was that is obviously you want to have a space that for the vast majority of the time is filled more to capacity than sitting empty. And as far as S&L hospitality is concerned, yes, there will be receptions in this space or meetings with upwards of 250 people. but probably the vast majority of the time, that target's going to be more in maybe the 100 range. So to have a room that's capable of 300 while you're, for the majority of the time having considerably less than that makes you feel like you're in this sea of unfilled space. So that was another reason for the 6-foot reduction there. On the conference center again, the wood cladding, which is on the upper right-hand corner, a little difficult to see in the image, but I think you've got that in the handout as well. That was changed from phenolic rain screen panel to the extruded aluminum material that you see on the board there. Again, with the changes in shape to the building, the horizontal lines of the phenolic panel weren't fitting in really, and this has the vertical lines, the horizontal lines of the extruded panel fit in with our facade image much better, so that was a part of the reason for that change as well. Number 3, we touched on correct sizing of some of the trellises above the entry doors. That is mainly focusing on the trellises out to the patio that Kevin's going to be talking about a little bit more. Number 5, the removal of the nanowall and replacement with storefront glazing, which is the 2 kind of bluish color glazing sections you see there. In all reality, from a facade perspective, you're not going to notice anything different. It's one aluminum framing material versus the other. They both have glazing, so I don't think that there's a whole lot of change impact there. Glazing on the corridor, which you see in this image as well, was reduced slightly. Again, that really isn't a place for people to gather. It's a transition from the hotel to the conference center back and forth. So we pulled a little bit of glazing out there. Another part of the reason was for separation code requirements actually from the connector link to the hotel. And the last thing was some building overhangs on the conference center. There, again, with the right sizing of the space, there were some overhangs there that just simply no longer proportionately were correct and didn't have a lot of useful effect to them, so we pulled some of that back and went with a more simplified facade detail. As far as the hotel is concerned, for the most part, it's pretty much stayed unchanged. Although, interestingly, I was just this morning on the phone with our rep from Hilton, and they are still working through final modifications of the true design. They're finally getting a handful of them under construction in the country. It sounds like there's upwards of 200 in design right now, but they physically don't have one constructed. So as these first ones get built, which Stoughton will be one of the first ones, Hilton is actually tweaking things as they go. So I don't foresee anything major happening there, but wanted to mention on that. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Questions of the architect? General comment, Mike. I appreciate the improvements. Again, the downsizing, I think it's more right sizing, and clearly some of the things your firm is suggesting here, I think it makes it even more attractive building. So
thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the commission? Engelberger?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rodney, can you just go over I know there was some previous exceptions for this, and those were approved before. And then, are there any new exceptions here that we're looking at, or maybe you could just kind of highlight that? Go over
There aren't new exceptions. I think the one I highlighted related to the number of parking stalls is an interpretation assessment. So I think that's really the only change from what had been previously reflected upon. So that's what I'm most prepared to speak to.
Just, I didn't hear this in any of the comments. Maybe I missed it, but the reason for the changes going, lessening less rooms and less spaces, is that the reason they went with less rooms is to get less spaces? Is that?
I didn't hear that the parking wasn't driving
driving
the space for.
What was the reasons for these changes?
Reasons for these changes. Ultimately, it was a budget item. I mean, it was, we came in here in July with a lot of confidence of where we're at in terms of budget as pricing fluctuates, and maybe we're off on that. We started to see some things come in as Stevens Construction Group started to work with some subs, and
So it's cost items, basically. Yeah. So, Rodney, my question is, with regard to exceptions, there's no new exceptions, but And the concern that one of the commissioners had with, I thought I heard a kind of a concern of that there was like an exception there, but I don't think there was. I mean,
I
it still
must have
meets the
missed that.
requirements, right?
It does.
Of what our, it's not, yeah, okay. And I guess maybe if you could just highlight some of the previous exceptions that were,
I have to admit, I don't,
It's planned business. It's not PD, so.
yeah, so there, it's not like some of the other sites where we've got a planned development consideration. This is a traditional zoning in the planned business district. So I don't believe that there was any specific exceptions for the previous action. The one that I highlighted tonight related to parking is confirmation of an interpretation or clarification of an interpretation.
it still meets our requirements,
Yeah.
right?
So,
It still meets our requirements.
yeah,
We would.
the second bullet here.
And I had asked, when Rodney and I met earlier today, I had asked him to add the extra bullet, so that, my concern very honestly is, while I believe the developers would make a choice in good faith, to add space if needed, we don't have any opportunity to do with it, so.
It'd be listed.
At staff recommendation, we'd like to actually have them go ahead and meet that guideline. So, again, right now, the plan calls out for 32 future, but the bullet on the resolution asked them to put in at least 9 at this time. You may recall when we took it up back in the summer, we had discussions about the courtyard and the adjacent property, the proposed senior project and the like. I would also comment, I appreciate the continuing to look at the trash enclosures and the locations, because I think it actually makes more sense as they proposed it here. But we talked about at length about the courtyard and kind of the circulation and the like. I think we pretty much took the architecture as being proposed, but I don't remember any other exceptions.
Okay, so it still meets requirements. Yep, and then I guess my other, just to, Rodney, I was looking at number 2A, compatibility with city plans. It just says proposed plan is compliant with, or compatible with comprehensive plan. An exception was previously approved for this requirement. That's just due to the big box ordinance, right?
Yep.
It really wasn't considered under the big box ordinance?
Correct.
Okay.
We'll have that
And
same.
I guess that's where I was saying, are there any other previous exceptions, and is that the only one that I'm seeing here?
I believe that's true.
Yeah, we'll have that same thing on the next item with the Duncan.
With the what?
Dunkin' Donuts.
Oh,
The next one in terms of the big box, the way it brought for us.
thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
So did you get a motion on that, or no?
I would entertain one.
Motion approved.
Moved
The
and seconded.
resolution. Second.
And can I ask, just as a clarification, are you including the additional
As
clauses?
written, yeah, the resolution as written.
On the screen or the
Yep.
one in your packet? The one in the screen
It's
adds
on
the
the
bullets
On the screen.
bottom.
Yep.
Additional questions, comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you. Next item then is number 11. Mr. Yeskasil here from JSD Professional Development requesting of JSD Development request specific implementation plan amendment approval for Dunkin' Donuts, Lot 7-4, Kettle Park West, 2480, State Highway 138.
This is another building that's being proposed on Lot 7 within the Kettle Park West development. You'll notice the orientation of the building is on the southwest corner of Lot 7, closest to the roundabout. You'll recall the commission has acted on another building on this site, on the northeast corner of this site. As we've indicated in the past, the current GDP only accommodates for up to 3 buildings on this site. There are other buildings that are anticipated to come back in the future, potentially as a general development plan amendment. But initially, the focus on on the former one that was acted on, and now the one that they're proposing to construct that contains a Dunkin' Donuts is on the southwest corner. Certainly can go through more details as the applicant walks through it.
Mr. Jessica? All right, back again. All right, guys, we are looking to propose a 4,100 square foot retail building. It's a 3-unit building, white box building, and the south end cap would encompass Dunkin' Donuts. You'll see that drive-through lane on the west side of the building with a ordering station, and then on the south end of the building, that's where the actual pickup would occur. With the building, we're proposing a sidewalk around the north and east sides of the building with 23 parking stalls to accommodate the users. For the zoning ordinance, we're only required to have 13 parking stalls for a building this size. As you look at the overall development of Lot 7, and this kind of went back to 7-2 where we had this over parking issue. Once we look at everything as an overall site layout, and with the intent that, you know, a restaurant could sit somewhere on this site, and they tend to need a lot more parking stalls. We're going to see that overlap. As this is a condominium, people will have the opportunity to utilize those 23 parking stalls at different times of the day. So we would like to ask for that exception tonight for going over the 120% increase on parking. It lays out well for construction purposes, where you can lay that binder and surface course for this lot, have that circulation, get down to the trash enclosures on the south end of the property there on 138, and make for a nice site as we look for additional buildings to go forward. In terms of bike parking, we have one bike rack proposed on the west side of the building. That's for 2 bike stalls. Looking at the stormwater management and utility requirements, we are going underground on this site. As the value of the land is, you know, important to Forward Development Group, we like to utilize that as much as possible. So we will have a water quality chamber and infiltration basin right in the middle of the site, and all utilities, or the storm utilities, would feed from the Dunkin' building to that. Site lighting, we have a few light poles proposed within the islands. Those aren't conflicting with any of our trees proposed on the landscape plan. Looking on the landscape points, we are required to have 419 points. We're at 533. And then to run through, I guess, the quick exceptions for the site, we would be requesting an exception for the 10-foot foundation plantings, which again lends itself to more of the big box retail development. 10 foot of space between sidewalk and building is a lot of area to have that compact site and more urban feel. We'd ask for that exception. I went over the 120% parking requirement. We are over that by about 10 stalls, or by the 120% requirement by about let's see, it would be 7 stalls. And then lastly, the last exception would be the 400 square foot parking islands. We do have a few that are a little bit less than 400 square feet, and again, that lends itself to the big box retail ordinance. Architecturally, Rodney, if we could jump to the architecture. Sorry. And if you have the colored elevations, that would be great. TJK and John Bano from TJK is here if you guys have any questions, but the architecture lends itself well to what was proposed and approved for Lot 7B, or 7-2 as we're calling it. We have high quality use of materials comprised of brick, composite lap siding, fiber panels, metal trim finishes, and then aluminum storefront windows around the facade. You'll notice that the Dunkin' has a little bit of its own architectural quality to it, and for their needs and to have their brand stand out, you'll see that transition, which we feel it transitions well and will make for not a stagnant design for all of Lot 7B, but having that diversity will attract the users. And make for some interest for Lot 7. So if you have any questions, again, John is here to answer them.
Questions of the applicant? Mr. Hannan?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Do you have an overall of this Lot 7? Just, Kevin, if you could just review of what we've approved as a planning commission, what you guys are planning on doing, and how the site would flow with
Yeah.
these two locations, because it's 7-2
Yeah.
and then 7-4, right?
Yeah, so 7-2 and 4 are what we are finding to be going forward immediately or in the very near future. 7-4 coming online a little bit quicker than 7-2, but with 7-4, the site could sit by itself with the one access drive off of Kettle Park Way, and then as 7-2 goes forward, we would create that second access drive off Kettle Park Way and have that circular route all the way through the development. What's in there as dashed lines would be, what we're proposing in the future, which based on the building sizes that we're anticipating for 7-1 and 7-3, there's not much play that we can do here. I mean, you have double loaded parking stalls on 7-3, and we'd anticipate some type of drive-through use on 7-1. So
Right now though, correct me if I'm wrong, what's actually been approved on Lot 7, from our standpoint, allows you to have 3 buildings, not 4.
right, which we are making a submittal for the GDP amendment in March. So we would be working through that with staff and then ultimately coming back here for Planning Commission approval on that, which would ideally get rid of some of these big box retail exceptions that we keep bumping into as we move forward on Lot 5 and Lot 4.
Yeah. Just to speak to some of the exemptions, I like that you still kept some foundation plantings, just, reduce the width, and then understanding the tree islands, some of those would actually expand with the development of 7-3. So I don't see any issues with it. I think we saw Duncan was trying to get into town, and they found a spot, so I'd make a motion for approval.
Second. Moved and seconded. Are there additional comments or questions? Alderman Engelberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rodney, again, I want you to kind of go over the exceptions that we're looking at here. But I also have I guess I have a concern about the going from 3 buildings to 4. My understanding, when we approved the 3 buildings, if such case there was a restaurant, we may run into not enough parking. And now that complicates it even further when we go to 4 buildings. Isn't that right?
Well, we haven't acted, we're not acting on that request to change the GDP at this point.
What are we looking at right now?
This one site, this one building.
Well,
This is only the second building of the site that you're contemplating.
can you
Comment
highlight
on that, the overall square footage that was approved with the GDP for showing those 2 initial buildings or up to 3 buildings is not much different than we have proposed now for the overall square footage. And I guess, as Rodney said, we'll have some justification for that when we submit the GDP. Hopefully that will clean things up. If a restaurant use goes in, we'll actually, we're over parking 7-3 and 7-2, or we're asking to overpark 7-3 and 7-2, assuming that restaurant use will benefit from it. So we're going to find that balance there as we move forward.
So what are the exceptions with this one, Rodney?
The exceptions as enumerated on the resolution are as follows. Well, one was our staff review letter, but that's not an exception. Exception is to exempt the 10-foot wide foundation landscaping bed requirement adjacent to the building. To exempt the limit on the maximum number of required parking stalls. 13 are required. They're proposing 25 as part of this action. And to approve an exemption for the 400 square foot parking aisle end requirement. And he described how those would be expanded as the balance of the site, for example, in these areas would be created.
Which numbers are those on the letter? One is...
I enumerated them from the resolution. I don't know if I have the letter in front of me.
11-7-3.
Sorry?
Looks like
17 is the 120% on the parking.
What was the third one you mentioned there, Rodney?
400 square foot aisle, parking house.
landscape islands in the parking lots.
Yep.
So, the,
The 10-foot foundation plantings,
yep, that's the
They've
first
shrunk-
one.
Giving them
They've shrunk it to 5 feet.
right. Our general guideline doesn't allow more than 120% of the parking that is required, but in this case, you could just say we're going from
13 to 25.
25 and then the parking aisle.
Okay, explain the parking one again. It just,
Kevin,
Something
can you
doesn't sound-
highlight, I can highlight the areas where you think you're requesting the exemptions for. Am I designating them properly?
Yeah, yep.
This would normally need to be 400 square feet.
okay, yep, I understand that.
And the flip side of that, currently, until that's constructed, would not meet that requirement. So it was this site, I'm trying to think, was it another one, Kevin? This one.
Right. That one might actually make it. You know, it's that one to the south that you're at the 280 square foot range.
This one.
You know, a typical layout of a stall is approximately
Alderman Engel asked the question about, can I explain the parking as well?
parking.
Why
Sure.
not?
Sure. So the zoning code breaks this down as take the building square footage of 4122 divided by 300. You get to 13 stalls. And let me make sure I have that right.
It's fair to say that part of that is, again, the kind of drive aisle access all the way around the property.
Right.
Start looking at what's up, as you said.
Right.
From a planning standpoint, right now, as long as you've got to run that all the way around, you pick up the parking on
Exactly.
the right side of the property.
So, Mr. Engelberger, for that, you know, when you take the 13 required stalls, you look at 120% of that. I think it's 15.7. We're proposing 23 right now. This is due to site layout, construction, feasibility of, you know, laying asphalt now, knowing that it's going to happen in the future.
So normally a building of this size would only require 13 spots, stalls. And you're 15, but you're asking for 25 here. And this-
23.
23. What about, this is considered a restaurant?
This, no.
It's not considered.
It's a retail use, so
So
it's
if
the
this is a
same.
McDonald's, what would the parking be required?
Well, even in the Stoughton zoning code, I believe it's still one parking stall for every 300 square feet, even if it's a restaurant.
I believe.
Is that correct?
That
Rodney?
sounds correct, I believe you're correct.
Even if it is a restaurant-driven use, we're still looking at the same number of stalls. That's where we're finding that that future building in the southeast corner to the right hopes that it is a restaurant. You know, usually you're at a 1 to 10, 1 to 12 parking ratio, whereas that 300 square feet per 300 square feet requirement doesn't really, we'd be short on that building, is what I'm trying to get at. So we're trying to overpark the site now.
Intending to use that down the road for
Correct.
more parking. So I guess I'm not following our requirement is 13 or 15 stalls, you're asking for 25. Normally, the exception would be, if you're asking for 15, we're only gonna get 10.
Right.
Because that's all the room there is. So I guess I'm not following the logic here of that type of an exception.
Well,
You can help me out,
maybe what I hear you saying is you don't understand the logic or maybe agree with the logic of our code. Our code caps the number of stalls.
Okay.
They're asking for an exception to have more stalls than what our cap would allow.
But is that typical of ordinances, that they cap the number of?
Well, I
I mean,
think
isn't it usually, you have to have at least this many? Isn't that the norm?
I think there's an attempt to try to minimize impervious area that's unnecessary on a site.
Okay,
And so I think that's part of the reason why that's
okay.
in here.
And because we're looking at future possible restaurant spaces,
Yeah.
it would benefit that portion of it. I guess
From my standpoint, is when I looked at the plan, again, the area on the right-hand side, where they put the dumpster on the bottom right, if you look at the hashed area, is really the drive parking, or access thing, and so they're really picking up all those parking spaces on the right-hand side.
Yeah,
So it's just
okay.
from your standpoint, in terms of lot development, it makes more sense right now, is probably why you're asking.
Okay, so I understand that. So my other two questions on this is, that's a drive up there, right? that's going around the building, 12-foot? Is that a standard size for a drive-up, Rodney?
Yes, that's
In the design world, it is.
the Duncan prototype there. That's what they need.
Okay. And that meets the requirements?
You might recall.
We don't
when
have them required.
Duncan previously considered and acted on Duncan going on the BP side.
Yeah.
We didn't have, I think we were actually looking at a 10-foot
10,
drive.
correct.
Yeah.
Which was going
And
to
then my last question regarding this is, you're looking at Lot 7, and you're gonna develop about a quarter of it, or a little less than a quarter of it, that southeast or southwest corner of that lot. And
Correct.
the rest of the lot's gonna remain undeveloped at this time.
We're hoping that Lot 2 moves forward very soon. I mean, that underground infrastructure needs to go in now in order to service that southwest building, and that's not an inexpensive system under that parking lot. So, yeah, we're hoping to fill this thing immediately and get it moving. So 7-2 is in the near future as well.
But at the current time, you're only gonna develop that small area that's boxed in right there.
Correct. We've engaged the architect to move forward with developing their construction documents, so it's in the works.
Thank you.
Other questions? Rodney, if you could put back up the elevation, I've got one for you. Again, I appreciate the effort you and your architects have done on the north elevation and the east elevation, which again, in an orientation standpoint, are the inside, again, from the standpoint of where our highway access is and the like. My concern is actually looking at these two elevations, the south and the west. The west is, just as we were having the discussion previously on earlier applicant on the east side, we talked about what people are going to see. The west elevation on this building, I feel, is going to be part of the gateway, part of our, again, anyone traveling east along that corridor, going to turn left into Kettle Park. We've got the cul-de-sac and everything else. I think you've done a decent job on the south elevation of breaking it up and the like. But the west elevation, I guess I've got some concerns about the left side with the brick is fine. The right side is really what people are going to see on the highway coming in. Any thoughts to breaking that wall
Sure.
up a little bit?
As a designer, I'll defer that one to John. Thanks.
Good evening, John Bano, TJK. Your point is well taken. In all of these projects, the balance that we have to strike is the things that go into the front of house, back of house, entries without having to have signs going onto them, access from the parking lot, and all those types of things. This location that we're talking about here, and we're specifically talking, I believe, about this elevation, correct? Is the back of house from a Duncan's perspective. So basically, that's their coolers, that's their place where they wash their dishes, those types of things. And again, remember, this building is only 4,200 square feet. It's not very big. And that elevation is misleading because this is pumped out. That is closer to the street than this. With that being said, is there something that we can do? Yes. But again, on a 4,200 square foot building, trying to strike a balance between costs, entries, all those types of things, this is what we came up with, and it offered a certain nice balance for signage. But if it's the difference between approval and not approval, I can put a couple windows they'll be blanked out.
Yeah, from my standpoint, I mean, the orientation of this building, I understand, but to some of the comments about this is only the first quadrant that we're building, the attractive sides of this are to the vacant side, the vacant property. From my perspective, this building would have been rotated 180 degrees and put the storefronts that we see, the attractive side, to the highway and to the development to the west of this. You could have perhaps, again, literally flipped the drive-through, so the drive-through would be on the internal side of all of four of the buildings.
Yes.
And the like. To me, would be much more attractive.
I agree with you. The difficulty with that is we don't get the access, which are shared parking lots. If we'd have put the parking facing the street, we would have then had parking that is only dedicated to this building, whereas with the orientation that we've got right now, by putting the drive-through on the outside, we can get the shared parking lots And Duncan, let's face it, only uses their parking lots in the AM primarily. So this allows whatever development happens to have cross-access shared parking in the evening without having to interrupt so much.
I think it's a great use. My concern is, just as you said, they might only use the parking in the morning, but we're gonna have to look at the backside of the building every day, everywhere, and that's the primary entrance to this development.
Understood.
So, Alderman Engelberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask the developers to locate a couple windows on that elevation, blanked out.
Sure.
So it looks more like a finished building on that side.
Sure.
Where people are driving by. I
Allow-
guess I'd ask to have that put into the resolution.
Let's add that into the motion.
Can we,
There
can
was
we
a-
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
We have a motion and a second, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm basically asking or suggesting that we
Yep.
might amend and add some additional requirements.
Can I ask for clarification on that then?
Sure.
Can we have that done at the staff level?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm comfortable with that. I just want to bring it to our attention, because especially since we had the discussion.
That we're talking about, not
Whether, the question is whether
Can you give
you
us
put
idea,
full window or
John,
whether
of
you
the
put real
size?
windows.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
It probably depends on how, again, the question was whether you would be putting faux windows or real windows, functional windows. It probably depends on kind of
They
the
would
layout.
be real windows, but they would be spandrel, so they would be blanked off, because on the other side of that wall are walk-in coolers, and there's also dishwashing areas like I had mentioned. And they just need that back of house space because of the efficiencies that they need. This space is down to 2,200 square feet. That's the prototype. And they can move the pieces around to fit that square footage, but they still have to fit the pieces in. So at this location is the sort of nuts and bolts about how stuff gets done for people in the front.
And again, I would comment on the fact, and give you credit for the fact that you are putting those coolers and things, you are encasing them. We have certainly seen other projects that have come before us where those coolers would have been exterior, and that's what we would have
Correct.
looked at. I'm just asking for some additional architectural treatment on this.
Yeah, I would say aesthetic enhancements are all we're looking for. I mean,
Yeah.
added light and everything like that doesn't make sense for that space. I would say just a faux window aesthetic enhancement to kind of give the building's visual from four sides, so
Sure.
visual continuity
Understood.
from all four sides. So I'd say that's, if we get included in the resolution.
I think what we'll probably do is we'll put a piece of glass next to this door, make that tied together, and then try to tie something together that mimics it on the other side, so it offers some balance to that elevation.
Comfortable with what they're proposing? We'll incorporate it in a motion then in terms of looking for some additional.
We had the motion and a second. Do they both agree to that additional condition being added?
Yes. Okay. I just want to look at the landscaping quick.
While you're looking at, are you okay with both the motions?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Just want to see what plantings are. So currently on the landscape plan, it looks like in between that walkway, so there's a sidewalk that leads to that door. If you actually go back to the elevation, Rodney, quick, and then we'll go to the landscape plan. So that shrubbery right there actually is misrepresented on the elevation. It's not on the plan here, on the foundation. So I guess, would you guys be open to adding some landscape?
Yeah,
Carl Forster grasses or ornamental
which-
grasses, perennials, things like that.
We actually had a few comments from Michael on his staff report that our points were off with the trees. So we addressed those and sent in a new landscape plan already, and actually had a complete brush stroke of that covered that entire elevation of northwind switchgrass.
That'd be nice. Okay.
Any other questions, comments, suggestions? Seeing none, the approval of the motion as provided in our packet with the additional clause regarding the architectural enhancements on the
West side.
west elevation. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you. Brings us to item number 12, a presentation and discussion by Sean Higgins of the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission, CARPC, regarding Greater Madison Vision Initiative.
Is there a presentation out here that I'm supposed to look at?
Oh, he was supposed to prove
Well,
it,
that's
right?
fine.
So,
It's okay.
yeah, I put those resolutions right up here.
He probably did. Just That's okay. They acted on him already.
Dropped on my desk.
No, this one doesn't have it.
Before I left. I'm Sean Higgins,
Compliant.
Senior Community Planner at the Regional Planning Commission.
Just for true.
What's that?
I want to thank you all for inviting me here tonight.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Again, I would thank Paul Lawrence, who is a member of your committee and requested you to come and talk, fill us in on what you're up to.
Yeah. I do have a presentation if I can give you my
Yeah, definitely.
flash drive.
I'm looking for it.
Should be able to help me open there. Before that gets loaded, just a quick update on what the Regional Planning Commission has been up to. We recently revised our urban service area amendment process, so that's one of the things you may probably know us from expanding the sewer service areas around the city of Stoughton when development gets to that part of the city. So I think, Rodney, when was the most recent USA amendment you guys came through with? It was probably
Kettle Park West,
Park West? Okay.
I believe.
It was a couple of years ago now, 5 or 6 years ago now. Is that when that went through? At any rate, that process is no longer a review of both the regional plan and water quality master plan. It's now in two separate tracks. So there's a water quality element, which is reviewed on behalf of the DNR. We send a recommendation to them about the water quality elements. And then there's also a periodic review of the regional master plan. And that second point is what I'm here to talk to you about this evening, which is an update to the regional master plan. And that initiative is being called a Greater Madison Vision. Why the name, you ask? Well, I'm anywhere but Dane County, and somebody asked me, where are you from, rather than saying Sun Prairie or Stoughton, because I don't think that they will know that. I usually start out with, where are you from? And if they're from, say, New Mexico, I say, Chicago. If they say, oh yeah, I grew up in Evanston. Whereabouts are you? Well, I'm actually from up Madison. Oh yeah, my wife went to school in Madison. All right, well, Sun Prairie. I'm from Sun Prairie. Oh, okay, now I get it. So, for a lot of people, a Greater Madison or Greater Madison resonates as referring to Dane County. And some of the surrounding areas, because it is the largest city in the area. Do you guys have a clicker, or should I just tell you next slide?
I'll
Okay,
take
so
your cue.
we're gonna have a little quiz here. How many people do you think are in the stands right now at that Badger game?
78,000.
Exactly right. 80,000 people is about what the capacity is on the stadium. And 80,000 people is about how many people Dane County can expect within the next 10 to 12 years. 80,000 new people. So imagine all of those new residents of the county are now in that stadium and they go home at the end of the day. Could you jump to the next slide? I think it's just going to tell us that there's 80,000. Next one. So where do they live? What sort of housing do they occupy? You might have a smaller family in the one on the lower right. You might have a mid-sized family, a couple of kids in the center one, if you want to keep clicking through. And then there's the rest of the population. If you're an empty nester, where are you living? If you are a young professional, where are they living? Point with this slide being we're going to need to think about a lot of different housing types for those 80,000 people in 10 to 12 years. Likewise, where will they be employed? 48,000 out of those 80,000 will probably be in the workforce. Retail, finance, healthcare, business services are all very strong likelihood for those people being employed there. And those are mostly office jobs. Also, how are they getting to and from their place of employment to their house, to where they relax on the weekends? Are they all, each of them, in one car? That's 80,000 cars on the roads in the county. That's a lot of traffic. Or maybe they're taking some other means of transportation to get where they're going. Likewise, we're talking about billions of dollars in infrastructure investment, roads, sewers, water systems, the lifespan of which will outlive many of us. Washington, D.C. has pipes in the ground from Lincoln's time. Madison has pipes in the ground from its founding, and I'm sure Stoughton does too. One of the major hurdles to having seamless planning and investment in construction and infrastructure and taking care of some of these other issues like adequate housing and so forth is, well, who's making the decision? Not so much who's making the decision, but how many of people are making this decision. So local decision is where most of this is happening, and there's, next slide, over 60 local government units in our county with 2 decision bodies per unit. That's a lot of decisions being made in a lot of different areas throughout the county. So one of the things we did at the very beginning of this update to the regional plan was assess the values of the community. One of the regional challenges identified was getting to where you need to go on time. We also had another one that floated to the top was the cost of housing. Around a third of households pay more than 30% of their income on housing, and that 30% is set typically as a bar for affordability. Also, are workers able to physically get to the jobs that they would like to work at? Meaning, are there the jobs in the region in the first place? Is there a way that they can get themselves there in a reasonable amount of time? Do employers have access to the labor force, skilled labor force that they need? And can workers get the training that they need? Another value that came out in this survey was the importance of reducing the operation and maintenance costs of infrastructure. Every little bit helps with this. We recently did an analysis of the Middleton Westport area and found that a small increase in density could reduce transportation infrastructure spending by $12 million over 25 years. So that's a lot. And of course, are we ensuring that all community members can thrive? By about 2040, a third of the county will be people of color. Do they have the same access to opportunities? Are they experiencing the same health outcomes? Also, most of the new land we're developing is coming from somewhere, and that somewhere is farmland. In 2040, are we still going to have a robust agricultural economy? Will we have access to healthy foods, rather? How will we maintain the cultural heritage that is farming in the county? And the list goes on and on. You can jump ahead 2 slides for me. There's also the things that we're not really we weren't really counting on, or things that we can't project from the trends, and that we can't imagine in our head and say, this is the desired future I would like. These sorts of things, these driving forces like autonomous cars, no pun intended, driving forces, no, nothing. Also, the aging of the population is a major player, but issues of technology. Who would have thought that you would have a computer in your pocket that can think circles around Deep Blue, the computer that beat the chess champion not so many decades ago. So the importance of having a long-range and shared vision is not lost on the residents of Dane County. Around 75% said that it was extremely or very important to the success of the region to have this vision. Unfortunately, more than half ranked it as fair or poor in terms of performance to this point. So are we playing from the same playbook? Are we even playing the same ball game? We have, to help us with this initiative, we've established a steering committee. It's comprised of, I believe, 36, probably more at this point, leaders from area businesses, government, nonprofits, from large and small towns, cities, villages alike. And we're trying to make sense of these values and regional equity challenges that we face. So the graph you're looking at there is plotting these different issues. Vertical axis being how important is it, horizontal axis, how well are we doing as a region to address those issues. So you have that cluster of regional challenges, which include things like poverty, increasing jobs, reducing crime. And then you have regional equities, which are things that we're doing fairly well at, that are important, but we probably should be mindful of not letting those things slip. So educational access, local agriculture, things like that. One of the next stages we're going to be jumping into is doing some scenario planning. We're developing a regional planning simulation game with the UW. So that's, I'm personally very excited to see that happen. Next slide. So we have our values and goals, and from that we get our desired future. Over on the right, and this is the step we're jumping into now, we have these sort of driving forces like autonomous vehicles, which give us the possible futures that we might see. And from that, we hope to develop alternative scenarios that residents throughout the county can weigh and vote on to yield ultimately a shared vision and plan. Probably skip through these in the interest of time. Next one. So Greater Madison Vision is envisioned as something that brings people together to create a shared vision for the long term that will guide public and private decisions about future growth within the region, with the aim of improving the quality of life, economic opportunity, and the natural environment for everyone. In terms of our timeline, we're in the second phase here, sort of exploring our options. 2018 will be more about creating a vision and plan. Go ahead a couple. One more. I'd encourage everybody to visit our website, agmv.vision. Check that out. We're sort of just rolling out the public engagement aspect of this regional plan update. So one of the things we're adding is periodic questions of the day, posting to Facebook and Twitter, different tidbits about the region, questions, and we may start doing some small surveys, 1 or 2 question topic surveys in the near future.
Great, thank you. Are there questions of Sean? Alderman Engelberger.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate your presentation. Your organization is basically planning for the future as a region, and you know we're in the middle of right now of changing our comprehensive plan. And I would think we would want to look to you, to your organization, to, you know, when you guys are making changes on things, localities probably should be making some of the same changes. How are you communicating the things that you guys are doing at that region to the local municipalities and townships and everything, so they can keep up with the changes that you guys are looking at?
One of the ways is by doing exactly what I'm doing this evening, coming out and making our presence known. CARPC's had a long history of just being the urban service area people, and it's not really widely known that we do have a lot of services we can offer in terms of mapping assistance, design charrettes, things like that for neighborhood design, assistance with comp plan updates, and other studies. So, you asked that question, and I was thinking the same thing just in reverse about Stoughton, because you all are going through a comprehensive plan update. So one of the things that I'm trying to do is reach out to people like Rodney at the respective communities and get a sense of what the timeline is for your plan, what the outreach and education components are of that effort. Will there be a large survey? Would there be something in that survey that would be interesting to look at, useful at the regional level, and vice versa? Would something that we've already done to this point in the regional values survey be useful to the city of Stoughton to consider? So I think regular phone calls, email conversations, but also getting out to the various planning bodies in the area, discussing.
Other questions, comments? Seeing none, again, thank you for coming out.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Brings us to the item 13, the comprehensive plan rewrite. Again, just a reminder that all the documents can be found on the city main page at www.ci.stoughton.wisconsin.wi.us. As we have in the past, we will give folks an opportunity to have public comment. We have a couple folks that have signed up. The first one this evening is Roger Springman from 812 Creederman.
Thank you.
Roger, welcome back.
Thank you, Chairman Jewell. So I've been at this microphone before. I was here last, December early, and made some just kind of general comments about my perceptions of the process and what I had seen to date. I participated in the visioning session, done the survey, and I've also written the city council. I guess it was actually mid-December when I wrote the entire city council on things that I felt were still not quite where they had to be. So I'm coming here tonight because we're getting towards the end of the process, and I'm still very concerned about where we are and what needs to get done. And by the way, just so I know where I am on time-wise, are we tracking time or kind of being a little fluid on that right now?
Generally, we limit to about 3 minutes, but...
Okay, just kind of give or take. All right, thank you, appreciate that. So what I want to do is say, I could sit here and pick apart what you've done or what I think could be improved, but I don't want to do that. What I'd rather do is say, when I look at the entire process and where we are tonight, and then I look at what was done in 2003 when the last update was done as part of the smart growth process, this is supposed to be a citizen-driven process with a lot of community involvement. And I'm here to tell you, and I've done a lot of citizen stuff in my lifetime, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. And what I want to do is concentrate my limited time tonight on what I would say you should do to get final citizen input into where you are with the draft plan. As I said way back in early December, it's still very, very hard for the average citizen to use what you have on the city website. Basically, it's impossible unless you're into an in the weeds guy like I am, who doesn't mind diving in and getting wet. You cannot use that site if you're an average citizen and not track this process. It's still semi-useless in my opinion. And I said that back in December, I'm going to say it again now. So here's what I'm going to recommend that you need to do if you really want to be honest about more citizen or public involvement in your final steps. One is that there's a lot of analysis and a lot of things that could have been done with the old plan before we got to the new plan. So what do I mean by that? So citizens have not been provided with a clear, concise information on the impacts and shortfalls and successes of the current plan. Why is that important? Recall, this is an update to the current plan. You cannot know where you want to go until you see where you've been. So what I'm saying is that until you analyze the old plan and give more specifications for citizens on what's wrong with it, what worked, what didn't work, where the benchmarks hit from basically 13 years ago, it's really hard for the average citizen to know what should be changed or what could be changed. Of course, you did the citizen survey, which I appreciated, and I think that's fine data, but it doesn't get to the core need of getting to an analysis of the old plan. There's not been a good analysis of the old plan to date, and that's a big omission in at least the way I look at it. So what could be done here to catch things that were missed? In my opinion, I talked about the importance of understanding why school enrollment trends are down in Stoughton. It's a big, huge issue for Stoughton. All school systems in the state are struggling with enrollment. However, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have spent a bit more time analyzing student enrollment problems in Stoughton. This is a big deal because that drives us to kind of think about new families, young families, more growth, and maybe more residential reserve for single-family homes. But we've got to understand what's wrong or what's right with our schools. And quite frankly, that is not done in the stuff I looked at, and it should be done yet before this process is over. We have perceived stagnation of Stoughton. This is something I mentioned way back last December when I came up before briefly. We have to understand what's working and what's not working in Stoughton. Again, the community survey did a little work trying to help with that, but it's not an issue analysis. There has been very little issue analysis going into helping citizens understand where we are today, what the old plan tried to do, and what new ideas might work to make Stoughton even a better place. And a couple other minor things, well, I shouldn't say minor. The other thing I do want to get into is this. There are some things that are the benchmarks of a good public policy plan that helps citizens understand what they should do or what they can talk about in a public session to make Stoughton a better place. So I'm going to propose this. The Planning Commission, either tonight or in the future, needs to decide and needs to take a proactive step towards having more public discussion. Now, why do I say that? Because there's been not significant time devoted to public discussion to date. And so let me give you a few things that you should consider for public discussion. For example, I went back, I did look at the current draft and tried to figure out, well, why is that there from our old plan? So one of the things I found in there was, to date, there's been no discussion on whether the 100% flexibility factor ought to be even considered in the new update. Recall that, those of you that I'm sure you noticed in there, there's a 100% flexibility factor, and I looked at that and thinking, why did you do that 13 years ago, and why should it even be there today? There's been no discussion about that at all in any documents that I've seen, so that would be something I'd recommend for consideration for your public discussion in the coming weeks. Another one would be there's been no discussion on downtown parking issues, congestion needs, and what can be done. Recall, if we're going out 20 years now into the future, we ought to have a little more thorough discussion and kind of foretelling what downtown Stoughton's needs are and giving the citizens a chance to weigh in on that. Another one is in the current, in fact, even in the current document, there's something called the Gateway Business Park. It's north going out of town, and I thought, well, why is that there? That was put there in 2003. I have no idea why it's even there now, and why don't we have a discussion about why that even has to be in there today, which I think it is, as I looked at the current proposed draft. So there's things like that in there, and of course another one is there's also very little discussion about citizen interest in saving farms in the greater Stoughton area. So there's a whole bunch of topics that Stoughton residents ought to have a chance to respond to as a function of further public comment and discussion. There hasn't been any discussion so far. There's been some comment like I'm doing tonight, but there's been no discussion, and that's something wrong with the process. So until we have discussion, we really don't have a community plan, and that's what I'm going to point out to you as a major need for this last couple weeks of the process, or however long it takes. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. The other registrant that has signed in is Denise Duranacek? Denise?
Good evening. My name's Denise Durancic, and I served on the City Council during the entire smart growth planning process. So consequently, I'm pretty educated, and I understand the planning process. The present process does not need to start from scratch. Therefore, the main goals are to update the plan and the direction in the plan and ensure that the plan reflects the vision of the community. These goals have not been achieved. In my 3 minutes, I can only address community input. During the first smart growth planning process, the community filled out a 14-page written survey, and we got a 21% response rate. We had 2 vision workshops, and during those workshops, we offered childcare and transportation assistance. There was a 24-member steering committee that held multiple meetings over several months. The public was allowed to attend, ask questions, give feedback during these meetings. Open houses were held, and maps and draft written plan were in the library for review. The present process stands in stark contrast to that. The first survey, the survey you did was short and online, yet only received a 12% response rate. In addition, over 100 people didn't finish the survey. One vision workshop was held on a Packer game night. Sorry guys, but that sends the wrong message if you want community input. The open dialogue and exchange of ideas we had in the first process is missing this time around. 3 minutes during the comment period is not a dialogue. While the draft plan is on the city website, as it's already been pointed out, it can be very difficult to negotiate, and I'm sorry, but maps are terrible to read on regular computer screens, and maps are very important in this process. In addition, it's easier to blow off an email than it is to blow off a face-to-face dialogue with someone. In fact, of course, you know 80% of our communication is nonverbal, so it's important to have dialogue and face-to-face dialogue with people. Now, to show that you're genuinely interested in the community's vision for Stoughton, you need to improve the public input process. I think the gentleman before me had some suggestions. I have some ideas. I think you need to expand the public's awareness of this process by placing the draft and large maps in the library for several weeks. That gives people time to review it, to think about it, to think about their plan. I think the gentleman before me raised some very good issues that you should be also discussing. And that can be in neighborhood meetings or district meetings with their city council people, because the city council is who's going to be actually voting on this plan. Putting forth real effort to engage people will make them buy into the plan. If you don't do that, then it's perceived that this plan is just the mayor's and the developer's plan. If you allow that to occur, you're not the people's representatives. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Other questions of the speakers? Seeing none, is there anyone else who would like to address the commission this evening? Okay, right now, based on the original discussions that we had, let me take a half step. I think a number of folks, did you send out Sid's comments to everyone?
Yes. Yeah.
We did receive one correspondence from Alderman Sid Boersma. He sent it to the three of us council folks, and then I asked Rodney to send it out. He was unable to join us this evening. He said he's concerned about the amount of input from the commission that the commission has received to date from residents of Stoughton to this very important and significant issue, the future of our city. It was important to take the survey and obtaining the results, but the response rate to the survey was not great, and I know some residents would like more direct input on various issues currently before the commission. Further, I believe information should be provided to our public library with maps and materials under consideration. I believe the public forums would be advisable, scheduled by the commission prior to the commission moving forward, and for this reason, he's suggesting that 4 sessions be scheduled, one in each of the districts in the near future, at reasonable times, widely advertised and announced to allow direct input to citizens who would like to speak. City staff could be present to provide input and to take notes. As an alderman, I would be willing to help coordinate a session in my district. I've often spoken about my commitment and desire to give constituents a voice in the city issues, and I believe this is a good way to do it. Signed, Sid Boersma, Councilperson, District 1. So again, we want to make sure we forward that. Michael?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to also mention Roger Springman did send a letter also a few days ago. I don't remember if Roger referenced, but he did speak about a lot of the things that were in that. I do agree that for an open process, and I've been asking for that all along too. Rodney, I think, has got the rest. Is that the rest of the schedule up there on the board?
That's what the consultants have suggested at this point.
Okay, I got a couple of questions, and I mean, I would like to see this stuff at the library and notice to the public that it's available for the next month and a half or whatever at the public library. Do you see any problem with that, Rodney?
Nope, we can have it there.
Okay.
Well, in fact, I guess just as a comment, Michael, I mean, we did have the public hearing, public presentation a few weeks back.
Right.
There were all the boards, maps, a lot of those things.
Right.
We could easily get those out.
But I think,
if they have space,
where
for
people
all.
can access it at any time, not just 7:30 on a Wednesday night or Thursday night or whatever. I think we need to be as open as possible for the community. I got a couple other questions for Rodney on the history. I don't know the history of this because I wasn't here at the time. When this plan was adopted in 2003 or whenever it was, 4, somewhere in there, 5, was that the first time we had a comprehensive plan, or was that?
There was a master
prior
plan.
to that?
There were state statutes that changed about that
Okay.
time that enumerated a number of additional efforts that needed to be undertaken and studied as part of the comprehensive planning. They called it smart growth planning law. So there was a very rigorous process to undertake, meeting I think there was 9 or 11 elements that really need to be focused on. That was done very rigorously. As you recognize, this is an update to the plan. Certainly the plan is a guidance document and a visionary document. What I think we've not gotten well from folks is specific parts or language changes that they'd like to see in the document. The survey and all the communications that we've gotten via email have put all the people who provided their email address on a distribution list. I think this actual meeting notice also went out to all those folks, 100 or 200 different people that have provided that. So people that have shown an interest in being engaged, we've certainly tried to extend that opportunity to them as well. Actually, I recall back to the early 2000s when we struggled more with electronic disbursement. Now we actually are doing it to much better standards than we did in the past. I agreed, there's always room for more improvement, but it's far different now than it was at that time, and I'd like to think that there's actually some people that it's reaching that it didn't in the past.
Yeah. I would like to see it, the materials at the library, I guess, so people can take a look at it. But
Sure.
I guess you know, it is a very, very vast thing that we're doing here. I mean, there's a ton of information. I don't know, how many pages is that document? It's like 100 and...
Well, it's over,
or something like that, or... It's a big document. Plus, you got all the maps. A lot of people don't even know how to read a map, you know. And I guess when I clicked online and just to see where we're at in our process, what people actually see when they go to our website, I saw, you know, an updated document, but it had very little, you know, highlighted yellow things in it. I guess what I'm thinking is maybe a lot of the input so far that we've had has been put on those maps, and I know you had before and after maps at that public meeting we had a few weeks ago. I don't know how would you, you know, I think we really need to make the process open, and I really want the process to be open, but how do you actually accomplish that with such a vast and difficult to understand document that a lot of people really don't even understand what it's all about?
let me start by suggesting the document means something different to a lot of different people. The document is a guidance tool and a visionary document. Most of the strategies that you would have to implement as a result of the plan are related to ordinance changes, adoption of rezoning applications, or policy changes. They're not all prescribing ordinance language, if you will, in the comprehensive plan. That's not to say it's not an important document, because it is. It's trying to help guide future decisions. But it's not the ordinance that lays out the landmark standards or the historic preservation or you name it, the sidewalk standard. All of those things are aspects of the comprehensive plan and are utilized to help shape future policy. But many of the policies are not directly spelled out in there. When we have comments from the community or whomever, I think it would be very advantageous to understand the specific elements that they're concerned about. If it's transportation, what about transportation is in their mind needing to be focused on? If it's about historic preservation, how can we bolster that language? If there's a map distinction on the plan that creates questions, a specific site or area or region, understanding what that means. You know, when we look at this as a long-range document, you know, certainly there's a reflection on the past plan, but ultimately we know that we're not going to build this all out in 20 years, but we also know that we're not going to be able to predict the direction of every application that comes before us. So we're trying to create a framework in that we can use as decision makers in the future to say, yeah, that's where we wanted industrial growth, or that's where we wanted residential growth, and then have some characterization about what that type of industrial growth, the residential growth should look like. Because once you get to that point, then you start considering how you might change your zoning code or change your subdivision and platting regulations. Those things precipitate out of your comprehensive plan document. It's difficult to hear that we're not reaching everyone, but we also know that it's difficult to get some people engaged in the conversation. And it's a massive undertaking. If people want to drill down to that level of specific discussion, I think that's a smaller list of people that would want to do that. There's certainly, we're welcoming that opportunity to do so, but that's not, much of the feedback has been more, you know, broad brushed.
So if I could, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to make one more comment. I think Alder Johnson may want to say something also. So, but before that, some of the comments I've heard from people are things like, you know, we've taken input, like let's say on the survey, and you know, we didn't get the numbers that we had in the previous survey. We got like 10%, from what I understand. But even what I'm hearing from some individuals out there that are telling me that we've gotten that information, and now it looks like we're not really following that information. Now, I don't know where they're getting that, because I've looked and I can't find where they're saying that comes from, and I'd like to find out from people that are saying those things. You know, for instance, people are all over the board on, some want 40% growth, some want 5 to 10% growth, and we had questions on our survey that said that, and there was, so many percent said these two answers, so many percent said these two answers. I don't know where they're getting that out of the information that we've got online right now that says, you're not doing what the community says that they want done. So I need to be educated more myself on where they're getting that information and where that's coming from. Maybe it's coming from at the public meeting that we had where people heard verbal information. Maybe that's where it's coming from. I'm not sure, but I want to find that out. So I think those are some of the, from what I can tell, those are some of the concerns that people have in the community. And like you said, Rodney, it's really hard to get people to come forward and speak their piece if you can't get them to meetings. And we have had a lot of opportunities. I mean, every plan commission meeting is public, every council meeting is public, and people do have opportunity to come forward. But I think we do need to make a better effort to get things at the library and maybe put something out there. Maybe have a box at City Hall where people can drop more suggestions regarding their concerns over the comprehensive plan and that type of thing. So anything we can do to make the process more transparent is, in my opinion, is what we should be doing for the community. So thank you.
Alderwoman Johnson, would you like to speak?
Yeah. Hi, thank you. I was going to wait and say this stuff tomorrow night at the council meeting, but I thought it might be relevant for this. I'm Kathleen Tass-Johnson, alderperson of the 2nd District. I'm also a member of the Landmarks Committee, and the last meeting we had on Thursday, the Landmarks Committee brought up a point that they would like to have been part of more of the process. No one asked them. One of the reasons I ran for alderperson is I wanted to represent the constituents, and I think we're losing them. I went to a party in my neighborhood on Saturday, and it seems like what I'm hearing from the constituents is that they'll say something, but in the council, we're not always following them. For example, when we did the referendum, on the KPW, we did the exact opposite of everything they voted on. And one of the things that is drawn to my heart is our historical district. It's been brought up in the survey, but I don't really see an emphasis on the comprehensive plan of it. I think it's a strong draw, even when I think the name is McLivin, the road with McLivin. Our historic downtown was emphasized on town as far as a draw. And I think we're losing it with all our other publicity of other things. And so I would reiterate what a lot of these people came and said today, but also what Sid Bozeman said, that I would also be willing to try to set something up with just in my district, and so that I could definitely know what they want, and it's not necessarily coming from the survey people, that I could say, okay, this person said this and this and this, and I know we might have the statistics, but at least I could be the voice of my constituents, where right now I'm removed from that process. So that's just my thought. So let me know if I can help with anything, okay? Thank you.
Can I just maybe? I think it's worth pointing out. As alders and elected people and appointed people, you all have varying viewpoints that you hear from all sorts of people. And I'm going to give you an example of how difficult it is to satisfy somebody's opinion, because it's going to be different across the board. Take, for example, the survey. There's a survey question in there that talked about the network of sidewalks within the city, pedestrian safety. If you read through those comments, you'll find about 50% that think we've got a very good pedestrian sidewalk network. The other 50% speak to discontinuous sidewalks or lack of this or that. So no matter how you respond to that, approximately half of them are going to feel like they weren't heard, and the other half are going to feel like they heard me and we're trying to champion that cause. I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but when you look at this survey and read the comments from many people, almost to a question, you'll find a range that mirrors that type of example, where you've got a wide range of opinions in both directions. So somebody's not comfortable you're accomplishing that. The other thing I think is important to highlight, the survey wasn't intended to be a statistical analysis. At the outset, we discussed that. We understood that we're trying to gauge some magnitudes of interest of certain aspects. The questions that the commissioners helped vet out and try to develop were ones that were tried to be crafted in a manner to solicit input and comments, but not to be used as okay, we got 75% of this and 25% of that. It's to say, okay, yeah, there seems like there's a lot of people that are interested in this aspect. Was there a polarizing opinion in one way or the other for a particular question? So I think it's important for us to take a look at that information in a manner that recognizes there's a wide range of opinions on every single topic. And we're not trying to ignore anyone's comments, but you cannot address everybody's to the same direction, i.e. like sidewalks. So it's a challenging undertaking. I would also implore the commission and the council to consider, the council had an approved budget to do this project, and you're fast approaching that based on the time and commitment in the public participation plan that the council had engaged as part of that undertaking. So we'd like to understand what else, and very specifically what else people would like to see from us. I think there's some information here about the library. Always can provide more information. It's how you provide it is the challenge, because to one person, having to go to the library would certainly be an inconvenience. To many others, that's a source of information. So I think the public comment period has always remained open. This process has remained open. And I certainly encourage the community to reach out with specific aspects of the plan or specific map issues that they'd like to have questioned and discussed as part of the commission process.
Other comments? Matt?
Sure. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I agree with a lot of the comments that the commission has said, and agree with Commissioner Alderperson Engelberger that, there has been a lot of public opportunity. I feel like it might be a broader issue is that, I think everybody's intention is to get as much input as we can to help guide us, why we're in this position, guide us to help, finalize these documents. I think everybody wanted to see more results on the survey, but, we can't make people do that. And we see a lot of familiar faces at these meetings, and we appreciate those familiar faces and familiar opinions, but we can't make people come to these meetings. And I think, for some people that do participate, it might be reaching out for more people to participate that I think that everybody wants about, well, why don't we have more people here? Well, there's no way to make that happen. So I think, it might just be, another data point to consider with the city and the citizens is that, there are some very passionate citizens out there who care very strongly about this community and want to see it, develop in a certain direction and vision. And there are some who are, say, content with the process or maybe choose to participate in a different way. And the best that we can do is provide that information. I think there might be another greater issue there that to be discussed on council level, and it seems to be brought up rather frequently, I guess, with the website and media and outreach and things like that, and that's not necessarily a planning commission issue. But I mean, I feel like there have been a lot of opportunities, and I'm not opposed to more opportunities, but I mean, there comes a point where things are heard, and as Rodney had stated, I mean, there's no possible way to make everybody happy with this plan. And I also maybe echo the comments that Rodney said about, I mean, it is a large document, and there might be a lot of misunderstandings with what the document means. I guess the way that I understand it, that the map that holds the most importance is that final zoning map of land use. Directing land use, but also the misunderstanding that this doesn't mean that this is happening in 5 years or this is happening, down the road. So I guess I understand the concern for more public input. I don't think it's the commission's intent to close any doors or keep anybody away or do anything secretly. Everything has been out there, and we're open to hearing, any sort of comments or opinions. But I also don't, there's no way to make it happen, to get that more input, so.
Alderman Engelberger.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with that, and Rodney's comment also about, the survey being, it wasn't meant to be the only way of getting input. I mean, we've had several other ways also. And even on the survey, it wasn't just an online survey. It was also available at City Hall, and there was other, so I mean, I do believe we have tried to make it as open as possible, but I would ask the commission to, I don't know if we need a motion on it or not, but I would ask that we do put the documents at the library.
Just do it.
That we, put maybe a suggestion box at the City Hall and at the library where people can put suggestions in the box and somehow notify that, whether it's in the hub or however we notify the public about things. So I would ask that we do that. I think that's the least we can do as far as making things more transparent. We want things to be transparent. I do believe there was another member of the audience that may have wanted to speak on this. So.
Okay.
Sure. Can I just add something quick? I mean, as far as reaching out, that we made a decision as a planning commission to send a mailer to every single household.
Right.
Every single household that did not reply made that choice to not reply. But we made the choice to notify everybody. So I don't know what more we could have done to get more responses out of that. They had that mailer physically to their door.
Alderman Jensen?
Yes, I just wanted to agree. I mean, the more input we can get, the better decisions we can make. There's no doubt about that. And the other thing is this whole process is by its own nature subjective. I mean, we try to gather fact, but for the most part, it's people's opinions that we're making judgments on. The other thing is that we must remember, and I think I'm reiterating what Rodney said, is that we're not creating a new document, we're updating a new document. So the first time it was done for, it was brand new. And so there was a lot more input and a lot more requests for information. We probably could have done a better job on this. I mean, there's always room for improvement. But it's not law, as I think as Rodney was saying, this is not something that is written in stone. This is a vision. So it's not something that, because it says this, we have to do this. It can change as time goes on. So we got to keep that in mind. But I am totally open to getting as much more information as we possibly can between now and the time that April 28th. Or the 25th. 25th is the joint.
Well,
yeah, 25th.
This is up here for discussion.
Yeah.
Is this
Yeah, because like you
time
said,
frame people are
we
hoping
budgeted
to
so
follow
much.
or not, or
I
trying
guess
to?
the other comment I would make is purely maybe coincidentally, one of the nice things that have come out of the survey and the comments that we've received, we're, as a member of the Redevelopment Authority, we're currently going through interviews and reviewing proposals for the redevelopment of the mill fab site, and we've been able to share some interesting comments and thoughts that have come out of it. So I would tell you, as somebody who's tried to use the information that we've been getting, that was certainly something that's been helpful, because we talk about what people are really looking for there, and it gives us a chance to do some things. So there are some side benefits that do come out of this as well. But in terms of the schedule, they're going to back up. Do you remember?
Lisa wanted to talk.
I'm sorry. Okay, please come up.
Hi, I'm Lisa Reeves, and I was just going to comment. Some of you may know that I'm running for city council, so I've spent a lot of time over the last few weeks knocking on doors. So I have some fairly current feedback just from my district. That's all that I can really speak to within the last few weeks. This is not a comfortable environment for a lot of people to come to. So I'm not sure that that's really the best way to elicit feedback. I've met some really, really great people who had a lot to say when I'm sitting in their living room, but they would never come in front of this group or city council. And I did hear a lot of people say, you know, if they had an opportunity for a small group forum, and I think Denise mentioned a dialogue, as opposed to filling out a survey, it's really hard. It's like email. If you share information in email, it can come across, may or may not come across the way you want it to. But if you're having a dialogue, I think it also brings out other ideas from people so that, you know, what I may not think of, somebody else does. So I think the dialogue piece would be really helpful in the future. You know, putting up a map in a library is great, but it's, you know, again, it's difficult to, you know, sort of read that and understand what does this mean. It took me it was not until I went to that public forum that I really figured out, you know, what all the maps meant. So, you know, I think everybody learns differently, and I think everybody, you know, responds and can offer opinions differently. So I think Sid's idea about the small group, I think that's where it's coming from. I don't think people are not wanting to be engaged. I think sometimes they just need a different forum. So I'd ask you to be open to that. Just because people aren't here doesn't mean they're not interested, because I heard a lot of really great interested people who just don't feel comfortable in this environment. So thank you.
It's a good point. Again, but I do think it's important for us to keep bringing back kind of when we started. We had an opportunity to take a look at the recommendations of the consultant that the city was engaging, and I feel like, you know, again, we talk about the survey that we chose. We pushed the envelope in terms of deciding to make sure we sent out, no pun intended, but to make sure that everybody did receive that. We did have that initial visioning meeting. I think there were 40 or 50 people. Notwithstanding the fact that apparently it was, I didn't recall it was a Packer night, but we had that. There were probably 40 or 50 people at the public forum. I mean, we just need to continue to look for opportunities to get it out. But I also think we need to realize what Rodney's saying too, and that's that we need to figure out, we need to get input and get specifics and trying to find out what folks are looking for. Again, we keep saying I think we want to be open, we want to do things, but then the other part about that is if somebody actually takes the time to give us some information, what are we doing with it? So I think great suggestions in terms of making sure that it's in the library. I think we've actually moved the other way. We sometimes think that everybody is moving to the technological age, and we think we're putting it out there by, you know, so it's available 24 hours a day online, and that really means that it's not available for most people to really go look or to do it. And it's, at least 3 of us can attest, trying to download even tonight's agenda at 98 gigabytes was a challenge for us to get some things. So we ended up going the old-fashioned way. So, Michael,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to talk about what Rodney's got on the screen up there. So we've got 2 Plan Commission meetings prior to the 25th of April, right? We've got March and April's Plan Commission meeting, and then the March 20th public hearing of the draft plan provided to city staff. What is that, Rodney?
It's where if the commissioners have any additional revisions on the 13th,
okay,
they get incorporated into the draft document that then they convey back to us.
20 to 24th publish, so that's the publishing period.
Yeah, well, that's when you you put notice in the papers.
Okay, and then March 24th to April, the 30-day notice period, what is that all about?
It's a notification period for adjacent jurisdictions and others to be able to provide comment prior to the public hearing.
Okay, and how do they provide comment? They do it through any means, basically, email or
Written.
in person or written, or?
We just can't take any action that we have to provide at least a 30-day window.
Okay, and then the 25th is when you're planning on having it voted on by the council.
Well, that's where you'd have the joint meeting of the planning commission and again, this is a potential calendar.
Right.
It's not scheduled at this point or anything. It's laying out kind of the steps that are yet left in order to move forward, absent any additional steps that the commission would like to see.
I guess I have a question also about, I know Parks through the Rivers and Trails Committee is bringing more information forward. In this process, have we, as a staff or as the consultant, have they asked for all of the departments about any changes to their particular part of the plan, such as landmarks? You know, they have I think there's a little something in the plan about landmarks. Have we asked landmarks to come forward with any possible recommendations, or any of the other departments?
There has been more conversation about it than there hasn't been a direct mailer to each department. We've been having leadership team meetings where we talk about the comprehensive plan, seeking their input. Also, Michael sits on staffs the Landmarks Commission. He's involved in the discussion, and two, he's as a staff person looking for specifics so that we can try to further develop the draft document.
So you guys as a staff are bringing these things forward from those meetings, and
We're attempting to incorporate them into the draft document.
Okay.
The River and Trails Task Force, we've had a number of discussions at the staff level about, and I've specifically outlined some corridors and pedestrian routes and bike routes that they're utilizing and developing even further. So, yeah, I think there is good discussion occurring, at least at that level.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Troll. I guess on the topic of the small listening sessions based on districts, I would agree with the comments that Mrs. Reeves said about, different forums. I guess to be more specific on that, I would certainly implore the council members to have those forums, not only for the comprehensive plan, but just for getting to know your constituents and hearing concerns. What I think would be really helpful from those forums, if they do happen, is to come back with as specific as possible items that need to be addressed or debated. What makes it difficult from the commission standpoint is broad issues without any specific points of, we need to address transportation. Rodney had pointed to this, but the more specific, the easier it is to have a conversation about than a broad philosophical discussion on, one way or the other, but not any discussion on how would that affect the plan. So, and then, if the forums do happen, and I think that they would be great on all different levels, I would highly encourage any council members to come back to one of the future planning meetings or email correspondence or share that with the commission to have discussion on certain specific items, or even if it is a broad item that is, maybe overlooked, and you're hearing an overwhelming response from your constituents that, I think we really need to dive deeper or get more specific, or I'd want to know more information about something, that would be helpful. More helpful than saying, well, we need more sidewalks, or, I agree, Roger, we should have some discussion about parking, but, just, that's a good issue to talk about, parking, but, talk about, something real general, is a great idea, but we need to understand how you'd like to see that happen. What specific areas in the town? Is there a certain land use that concerns you, or certain development pattern that concerns you, in a direction of the city? So that's what I would suggest, because I think it could be very, very beneficial, and I think you'd learn more from your constituents beyond comprehensive planning.
Roger?
To make that observation. So here's what I would suggest at that point.
Go up to the microphone, Roger.
Sure, thank you. So and I think it's a great suggestion that Lisa had, as she mentioned a moment ago, about this need for a different kind of forum and vehicle to exchange information, because we haven't had, as I mentioned in my comments, that discussion piece is missing a little bit. So here's what I think would be helpful. As I looked at the draft plan, and I tried to make as much sense out of it as I could in my limited time, there appears to be, when you add the survey comments that people spent a fair bit of time responding to, and then the things that happened at the open house a couple weeks ago, there seem to be a couple of driving themes for what changes are going to be into the new plan that you've already started to adjust, and that the consultant has started to make into practice in the updated plan. What would happen if you took the major new development themes, or things that are different from the old plan to the new plan, summarize them with a discussion concept about those things? So people, and the advantage for you folks would be this, that in order for you to compare what happened in District 1 versus 4, whatever, if you had at least a couple common things that all the different folks of Stoughton could respond to, then you'd have some from within that district. I think that would provide some uniform feeling for what the whole city thinks about those 4 to 5 major driving changes that Vanderwall has landmarked for you and put in the draft plan. Does that make sense? I don't want to use a lot of words here. It's getting late and things don't start to make a lot of sense after a while. But I'm just saying the public doesn't quite know the difference between the old one and the new one. So if you can summarize with 4 or 5 or 6, whatever it is, the major changes that you see that Vanderwall summarized that drove him or them to create this new draft plan, that would make the process more understandable, I think, for the average citizen. Plus, then they can also talk locally what bothers them or what also they could want to add to it. So that would make that observation.
I think it's a great observation, because I think we could, I think as you speak, some things that we talked about in emphasis. We talked about the east side of the town and what we want to see, and we had a discussion about even in terms of whether it was a specific or it was one of the neighborhood kind of concepts. We talked about the industrial side down off A. We as a commission took a look at the Highway 51 corridor, and to Matt's point, he and I literally were looking at individual pieces of property that we wanted to make sure were a part of some type of a discussion. The protection of the river corridor. I mean, I think, again, some of the things, I think it's a great suggestion, and we can work together to try and see if we can identify, there's at least a half a dozen general themes that I think that's a great suggestion. Because then it's a sense of maybe a new emphasis or things we were looking at.
I'm pretty sure we asked Vanderwall to explain that to us, and they have a document that compared the two, so that's there. So if we want to make that public. One of the things, I as a consulting engineer, I've been through this process in other communities, and this has been the highest stakes, most publicly advanced comp plan update I've been through. Some communities go through this once a year, and so between April and June, when they adopt the new plan update, that's it. So they put out a notice that they're having an update. There's a meeting. If you got comments, the comments, anything that came to the planner throughout the year, obviously, he keeps track of and puts into that, and then just reads off the changes. They make the update, and then some communities, that's it. They adopt the new plan. And maybe it feels lower stakes there because it's done, every year. We're going to go through the same thing. But this has been pretty elaborate. I will say that. So anybody that says it's not, it's been elaborate here. So
Randy, from the standpoint of the consultant, when's the next time that we were planning on having Vanderwall in to Commissioner Maloney's comment about some of the, them capturing some of the things that we've talked about?
I think the 13th of March is when we were planning on having them here, if I remember correctly. As part of a regular meeting.
If I could just ask a question. So really, according to that schedule there, Rodney, we're looking at 13th of March being, this is the updated document, and that's kind of what you want to get approved.
No.
So where is the time period?
It's the
in there?
document where yes, it's the draft at that stage, subject to any additional consideration or input that would be received, to be put into the draft plan. The public hearing draft is a draft version that would be sent out or distributed, and the hearing would be held on that draft plan.
So let's say after that hearing, we want to make some changes. When do we make those changes? It has to be before that 30-day period, right?
Oh, I think you can make changes to a plan document right up until adoption.
Until it's adopted?
Yeah, it's adopted.
We don't have to
You're
accept it.
taking public testimony on it.
Okay.
You still have that opportunity.
And our next, our March, or our April planning commission meeting is when?
Well, the regular one is, let's see, I don't know.
Second Monday or whatever?
Yeah.
And on the 25th, we'll have a joint meeting.
And again, we haven't confirmed whether the council, if we can hold it then. I mean, that's the option. The 10th is our regular meeting date. Yeah.
So I mean, let's say still got some changes to make. We could actually be voted on in May rather than April possibly. If we see that there's a need for that.
This just goes back to the original plan, that we set out 8 months ago. If you were taking when the consultants coming in, we talked about, we had to adopt the public participation plan, and we had to identify some of the things. And at that time, we talked about the survey, the visioning, public hearings, and then all the regular meetings.
And I think Rodney can understand why somebody like me would rather be an elected official than a staff guy.
Some days.
He couldn't pay me enough to do what you and Michael do, Rodney.
Okay. Thank you again, Roger, for coming. Thanks for the other folks that came and spoke and stuck around. Are there any other items with regard to the comp plan from the commission this evening?
In general, are we comfortable with this, or deviations from it?
I heard we're going to do whatever we can to get it in the library. Yep. And I guess my question about the Vanderwall would be, to Mr. Maloney's comment about, can someone characterize some of the changes?
Yeah, and I think they have, but if they can get that out somehow. The idea of a lot of squads forming, with creating new information out there. And I think people have said, it's hard for them to explain it. How are they going to lead all these different groups on what the maps are saying? And if you can't come into the meetings that are held that have the professional explaining it, it's really hard to come away with something that we can incorporate into the plan.
I was just going to say, when we do bring this to the library or whatever, it should probably have our contact information on it, so that if they have questions. And if you have questions, call these people.
I will put your number down.
No, really, I think it should, because that's one way we can start that conversation.
Well, I think on the comment period, on comment forms, I believe my contact information was on those.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, the number of outside comments we get is limited. You pick the topic. It's very difficult to solicit information or engage people, even if it affects them. Oftentimes, we don't hear about it until it's right at the meeting or after the fact.
I think the other part about it is we're going to want to make sure we put out there, again, whatever the proposed schedule is going to be going forward, we put it in there to say, hey, again, there'll be a meeting on the 13th, the 20th. There'll be right now there's a tentative meeting scheduled, a joint meeting between council and plan commission in April. We can also maybe grab, the hub tomorrow night.
I think the hub's here.
Hub's right there. Oh, I'm sorry.
This is all getting publicity right now.
That's right.
Plus we're on TV.
Yeah.
Can you do the minutes?
That covers
Right.
1/10 of the people that took the survey.
Yeah.
Right.
I think part of it is on whoever communicates with the community.
Right.
Because it's easy to say, no, we can always take more, but sometimes it's harder to tell them, well, we're open to your discussion, but here's what we've done to date. And
And before I got mad, that's one of my concerns / frustrations is, so far, I've heard a lot of people say, we need to be more open and do something because more people want to come, and it's like, okay, but what do you want to change in the plan?
Yeah, I want to comment on the email that came through. It was very, in so many words, from the Dems and progressives came through it, and a lot was very specific on participation. But then itemable actions are incomplete data in this section. Need more information on this section. This is unclear. As a planning commissioner, I don't know how to act on that. I don't know what to say as far as, incomplete information, but like what, it'd be a lot more helpful to know what information are you looking for to get, because the information is never ending. I mean, you could gather information on information. So to what extent, that's when I made the point, it's specific issues or directives are very helpful. Otherwise, there really is nothing to debate on as to what extent. So, I mean, I appreciate the passion, but in order to really make a decision, you need to know more specifics, I guess.
You're looking for some guidance as to what kind of action. Mike?
Yeah.
And I think, bottom line is we need Michael Slavely to come in next time and tell us, here's where we stand. Here's where we were, here's the changes, and here's where we stand now. What else do you want to talk about?
What I heard is-
What other concerns are there out there?
what I heard is we're trying to focus on the major theme changes. And you're not going to be able to talk about every.
And this document is a guideline, that's what it is, it's a guideline for future development.
Well, the other thing, quite frankly, if Michael and you can, Rodney, can take a look at it, and if we can capture the major themes that came out of it, that's where, again, our friends from the Hub and others can help get that out to say, okay, we're either heading the right direction or, we should head a different direction.
And that's why I said, when I hear people saying, people said this, but you're only doing this, you're not changing this. Well, where does it say that? I want to see where it says that, because I haven't seen where it says that. So, okay, we want to know exactly where we stand.
Consensus, though, next meeting, we're going to have the consultants back. We're looking for those things. We're going to try and we'll get the plans out, we'll get those maps and the boards and things in the library. Anything else you want to see happen in the next month? Okay. With
Move to
that,
adjourn.
Second.
all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Thanks for putting up with me tonight.